Part 61. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 631. You know nothing about life and death, you will pay the price for your arrogance. The black-clothed bishop said sinisterly. This line is too cliché. I suggest you change it next time. Oh yes, there will be no next time, Kaylan mocked mercilessly. The black-clothed bishop did not continue to talk to Kaylan, but stared at Kaylan fiercely, his upper and lower lips moving incessantly. Kaylan listened carefully. Although the pronunciation of the fake alpha language of the black bishop was a bit unstandard, the general content was barely distinguishable. The prayers he recited were basically the same as the content of the holy word. There is no difference. This method of sacrifice is a bit like the word spirit in the concept of occultism. It doesn't actually matter whether the pronunciation is standard or not. It is equivalent to a key card. No matter how badly damaged the appearance of the card is, as long as the inside is, as long as there are no errata in the recorded information, its functionality will not be affected. The holy word is also like a key that can open Pandora's box. On the contrary, the two pilots who paid little attention to Kaylan turned their heads frequently after noticing that the black bishop began to recite the holy word. Kaylan saw from the corner of his eye that the faces of the two people coincided with each other. There was a look of fear on the ground, as if he was extremely reluctant to stay in this place any longer. Is it that scary? Kaylan murmured in his heart. Shouldn't these hijackers all be prepared to die? Why are they so timid at this time? Just as he was thinking this, the black-clothed bishop suddenly twitched and fell to his knees on the ground, holding his hands firmly on the ground, and began to wail. Not enough, not enough. The sacrifice is not enough. Howling, his back suddenly tore open, and a tentacle shot out like lightning, piercing the pilot sitting in the co-pilot's seat and lifting it into the air. The pilot's body shriveled up at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even the corrosion seed parasitic in his body was not spared. Kaylan watched the erosion seed struggling to escape from the container, and a tiny tentacle tore open the pilot's skin and scrambled to get out from the crack. But in the end, the strength of these tentacles' struggle became smaller and smaller, until they completely lost their vitality. All the fresh flesh and blood was transported into the black bishop's body along the tentacle. As for the empty container, it was thrown aside casually. This black-clothed bishop is also a container. Ian's expression could not help but become solemn. Although his words just now were extremely arrogant, he had never really looked down on the other party, but even so, the other party still gave Kaylan a small surprise for Lan. According to the information that Kaylan has mastered so far, how powerful the thing summoned by the Black Bishop's sacrificial ritual is most likely to depend on the quality of the life force offered by the sacrificer to him. If it is a dying old man coming, if you recite the holy word, you can probably only summon half a rotten tentacle, but if an enhanced person or even a substitute of a prophet is used as a sacrifice, what is summoned will be much more terrifying. The black-clothed bishop in front of him obviously used himself and the erosion seeds in his body as a sacrifice. No, to be precise, the sacrifice should contain the vitality of both erosion seeds. And the vitality of this kind of biochemical monster is much stronger than that of humans. Not enough, still not enough. After sucking up a pilot, the black bishop shouted again. At this time, his face was already chapped, and black blood was flowing down his jaw and neck. On the surface of his skin, blood bubbles kept swelling up one after another, and then burst one after another. Each burst blood bubble would leave a festering wound, and a stench unique to the decay of corpses continued to emanate from his body. Bang! A gunshot suddenly came from behind. Kaylan immediately turned his head and saw that the other driver had slumped in the seat. One of his arms was hanging softly from the armrest of the chair. A G55 style the pocket pistol slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. On his right temple, there was a bloody bullet hole, and the bullet that penetrated his brain ended his life in an instant. It seems that the process of absorbing the Black Bishop's flesh and blood was too painful, So this guy simply chose to give himself a good time and shot himself in the head. But it was just the container that died. The corrosive seeds in his body had already entered a period of rapid transformation at this moment. The pilot's body was suddenly stretched out in a circle, and parasites were crawling rapidly under the skin, seemingly at any moment to break out of the body. So cowardly, the black-clothed bishop said, as if he was scolding or sarcastically. In the blink of an eye, the tentacle rolled up the body of the second pilot and pulled it closer. As if he was dissatisfied with the low absorption efficiency of a single tentacle, he shot a dozen more tentacles at the black bishop's chest and pierced the pilot's body. Vaguely, Kaylan felt the cockpit shake slightly, and he immediately turned his attention to the big screen directly in front of him. From this perspective, the Hercules transport plane passed through the clouds and was heading diagonally. Falling below, the White Ridge Mountains in front of the route are rapidly enlarging. Kaylan immediately realized the problem. He didn't know whether the pilot committed suicide or the black bishop hit the control stick while dragging the body and pushed the nose of the plane down. Now the whole plane was moving, with one diving towards the ground at an angle of nearly 45 degrees. If it weren't for the automatic balance system of the spherical cockpit that was still functioning, keeping the space in the cabin at a relatively horizontal angle to the ground, Kaylan and the black bishop would have already collided with those big wheels at the nose of the aircraft. Screen. According to the current trend, the transport plane will crash into a certain mountain peak in less than half a minute, destroying the aircraft and killing everyone. With the protection of the living armor, Kaylan had a high chance of escaping alone, but the group of Research Institute experts in the cabin behind, as well as Lynn Keiming and others, would probably have to be buried with this transport plane. Kaylan rushed to the main driver's seat, grabbed the joystick that was shaking slightly due to loss of control, and lifted it up with force. Crack. Perhaps Kaylan underestimated the power that the living armor could unleash, or perhaps he overestimated the strength of the joystick itself. He actually pulled out the entire joystick with its base. Fortunately, the nose of the plane has been lifted up, temporarily avoiding the risk of crashing. Throwing away the joystick in his hand, Kaylan entered a few instructions on the console, changed the transport plane's driving mode to automatic cruise mode, and set the destination coordinates in the airspace where Yagonactor is located. After doing all this, Kaylan looked back at the black bishop. The other party had already eaten the second pilot's body, so much blood and flesh was sucked into his body, causing his abdomen to collapse. It bulged like a big balloon, as if it would explode immediately if you kicked it. In a sense, the current situation of the black bishop is indeed a bomb that can explode at any time. The sacrifice ceremony is not over yet. If Kaylan attacks at this time, it will also be regarded as interrupting the ceremony. The process of this weird ritual is even more dangerous than the result. Kaylan couldn't help but think of a special usage. If the black bishop was used as a human flesh, anti-harmony, bomb to launch a suicide attack, the effect might be better than the direct putting the summon things into the battlefield is more obvious. The specific operation method is also very simple. Just get some explosives and tie them to these black bishops. No, you don't even need to find contraband such as explosives. You only need a knife, and when you are halfway through the prayer, sometimes he stabbed a knife into his throat, and a human flesh, anti-harmony, bomb with completely random power was born. As long as you arrange a few more people, it is not difficult to win the first prize. Since the heretical sect can send such a team of hijackers to Yonganport without anyone noticing, and can even switch contracts with the original crew members, then why didn't the Prophet simply organize a wave of black-clad bishop death squads to blow up the Ark? Woolen cloth? Is it because the black bishop himself has some unknown restrictions, or is there something he wants on the Ark, so he is trying to avoid it? You, soon, will, see, him. The black-clothed bishop's intermittent voice interrupted Ian's thoughts. At this moment, his entire body was severely rotten. He couldn't even maintain a standing posture, so he could only rely on the support of the tentacles, half crouching and half kneeling, but even the surface of these tentacles had begun to rot and suppurate. "It seems that he has accepted your sacrifice," Kaylan said softly. "You should be dying soon, right?" "No. That's not death. My soul will return to his kingdom, and my consciousness will live forever," the Black Bishop said with great difficulty, thinking that his vocal cords should be on the verge of being scrapped. "How old are you? Do you still believe in the soul?" "Tisk, tisk, tisk." Kaylan shook his head. "It seems that the prophet has really thoroughly brainwashed you." "Foolish people," the Black Bishop roared with his last strength, "you will never believe things that you have not seen with your own eyes." "What about you? Have you seen it?" "Of course. I have seen his kingdom, that is, the universe, eternity, is." The black-clothed bishop stopped abruptly before he finished speaking, and his head drooped. Thick black blood overflowed from his 7 orifices and fell on the ground in front of him. The black-clothed bishop had expired, and the corrosive seeds in his body had also lost their vitality, but Kaylan could feel that a force countless times more powerful than before was slowly awakening in his body. "It seems, the thing summoned this time is a great guy," Kaylan said to himself. He took 2 steps back and condensed a blood-red giant sword in his hand. After creating that, after building a huge blood-colored shield, Kaylan was able to skillfully transform the living armor into the weapon he wanted. However, what made him feel a little regretful was that he originally wanted to imitation a gun using living armor, but found that the bullet could no longer maintain its original shape after leaving the chamber, and would only become a large gun. Drops of splashing blood-red liquid. The living armor can only be condensed and formed when it is connected to his body. If it leaves his body, any object condensed by the living armor will return to its original liquid state and return to his body after a few seconds. In other words, although this thing can be transformed into a variety of weapons, it is only limited to the category of melee weapons. Kaylan didn't think about what kind of weapon to choose for a while, so he simply turned it into a standard-style fighting dagger for mechas, a dagger for mechas, but in the hands of people, it naturally turned into a giant sword. He stared closely at the body of the Black Bishop in front of him, not daring to slack off at all. That strong sense of crisis seemed to have strangled Ian's throat, giving him the illusion of difficulty breathing, and the heart in his chest, it was beating wildly, pumping the blood in the arteries to the whole body. Suddenly, Kaylan heard a second heartbeat. This heartbeat came from the opposite side, from the chest of the Black Bishop. The heart that had been silent started to beat again. Of course, Kaylan would not think that the Black Bishop had been resurrected. As a sacrifice to the gods, every ounce of life force in his body had been drained cleanly. Even if there was still a trace of consciousness left, with the help of this, the thing that made the corpse come to life is no longer the Black Bishop. The heartbeat was like a drum, getting stronger and stronger, and the corrupt body began to tremble. It struggled to stand up and raised its head. A pair of black eyes suddenly met Ian's gaze. At this moment, Ian's body shook violently, and the giant sword in his hand almost hit the ground. Although those eyes had no pupils and no focal length, the moment they looked at him, the indescribable feeling of being watched that he felt when he first used Holy Word appeared in Kay's eyes again. Within Ian's perception. Could it be that, what's in this body now is part of his consciousness? The great god mentioned by the Alpha civilization and the heretical sect personally descended on the body of the Black Bishop? But soon, this breathless feeling of being watched disappeared. If converted into real time, the total would only be less than 1/10 of a second. He just glanced at the planet casually, but he borrowed the eyes of the sacrificer. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 632. Kaylan didn't know how terrifying his power was. It was completely meaningless to humans, just like a destitute beggar who would never understand the concept of billions of wealth, and the actual situation may be even more exaggerated than this. At least the beggar can imagine a mountain made of gold and diamonds, but humans cannot touch the realm where he exists at all. After all, human cognition is based on the existing worldview and various physical laws, but he has the ability to modify these laws at will. Human beings can't even know him, so how can they pry into it? To his true power. With just a thought, he can completely wipe out mankind from this world without leaving a trace. This is even easier than a child from the old era destroying an ant nest with a piece of urine. When being watched by him, Kaylan couldn't even feel the so-called feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of powerlessness that you feel when facing an opponent that you simply cannot defeat. And his existence has transcended the current cognitive limits of mankind. He may be the truth itself of thousands of universes. In the myths and stories handed down from various human civilizations in the old era, most of the gods have a personified image, whether it is the god of Christianity, the Allah of the food cult, or the Sakyamuni of Buddhism. Or the Jade Emperor and Queen Mother in Chinese legends. After stripping away their magical powers and power, they are actually living people. Perhaps, only the concepts of heaven's way and heaven's will in Chinese culture are closer to the category of God. God should be the law of the universe, rather than a creature that can be personified. Heaven and earth are not benevolent, and treat all things as stupid dogs. The heaven and earth in heaven and earth are what can truly be called gods. Before having any interaction with him, Kaylan had always understood the word God this way. But now, his thoughts were shaken. His power seems to be higher than heaven and earth, and that sense of being watched proves that he is a self-aware existence, rather than a void and elusive natural concept. Kaylan really wanted to use words to describe him, but he couldn't think of any suitable words. Even in the Alpha language, which carries far more information than human language, except for him and Great God besides, I can't think of a better way to put it. Kaylan suddenly remembered the content recorded on the stone tablet. Although the text on the stone tablet did not directly describe him, it mentioned that he had many enemies, and the relationship between him and his enemies was the war between the two countries has lasted for countless time. So, he is actually a high-dimensional creature that humans cannot understand? Just like the characters in computer games, if the villain on the screen has self-awareness, he may never understand that beyond the world of 0 and 1, there is a real world, a world made of matter. World. The so-called artificial intelligence and breaking through the dimensional wall are just a poor imitation of the way humans think by data. In essence, they are completely two-dimensional existence. Probably, the relationship between humans and him is the same as the villain on the screen and the player in front of the screen. To erase a piece of data, the player only needs to simply press the del key. For the characters in the game, this is also an ability that is incomprehensible and even transcends the rules of the world. Perhaps, at this moment, he is like a player in front of the computer, looking at the screen and waiting for the development of the game plot. The sacrificial ceremony of the black-clothed host was finally completed. All the rotten flesh on his body was peeled off, and a brand new body appeared in front of Kaylan. This is a skinny body with dark skin. At first glance, it looks quite similar to a black skeleton. It is like a black skeleton wrapped in a layer of black skin, with flesh, blood, and organs underneath the skin. They have all disappeared, but the heart in the chest is still beating vigorously. Every time the heart beats, some liquid will be pumped to every corner of the body along the fine tubes under the skin. As for whether these liquids are blood, Kaylan is not sure. Just before the black-clothed bishop died, the thing dripping from his 7 orifices, then blood, Kaylan felt that it was more like asphalt. Apart from these places, the black bishop's body did not show any too weird changes. His skeleton still maintained the shape of a human. The phalanges of his 10 fingers did not grow into bone claws like the black skeleton, and there was no bone-like claws on his body. Things like bone spurs and scales grow out. Kaylan couldn't help but think of the mummies in ancient Egypt from the old era. The thing in front of him looked like a mummy fished out of the asphalt. Even the tentacles used to absorb the pilot's flesh and blood were peeled off along with the rotting bodies. Compared with his current appearance, the Black Bishop who had just been sacrificing looked more like a monster. Just when Kaylan was looking at it, the black mummy suddenly moved, but to Ian's surprise, its movement was not fast, it could even be described as slow, not to mention that fast. Compared to the black skeleton whose shadow cannot be seen clearly, even an old woman pushing a wheelchair might be able to move faster than this thing. The black mummy was like the junior zombies that appeared in the early stages of the plot in the zombie movies of the old era and had not experienced much evolution and mutation. It slowly approached Ian's location with slow steps. What is this? Kaylan couldn't help but have a doubt in his heart. Is this guy deliberately showing weakness to the enemy, hoping to let himself relax his vigilance? But does this make sense? The black skeleton summoned by an ordinary person's sacrifice is so powerful. This time, 3 people plus 3 erosion seeds are used as sacrifices. Will the one summoned be a zombie mummy at the level of a soldier? Kaylan didn't immediately rush up to give it a knife. Instead, he picked up the joystick he had just pulled out and smashed it towards the mummy. Bang! There was a sound of gold and iron mingling together, and the joystick hit the black mummy's body, causing a fine spark to fly. Listen to the sound. This guy's skin seems to have been metallized, so is his slow movement due to the influence of metallization, Kaylan thought to himself. If only the bones are metallized, as long as the joints are not welded, the body's mobility will not be affected. But if the skin is metallized, it means that every movement must be completed by deforming the metal. This resistance is great. So, this guy's ability is super high defense? Kaylan always feels that things are not that simple. He picked up the pocket pistol that the pilot left on the ground and pulled the trigger repeatedly on the black mummy. Ding! 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 The 5.5 mm caliber bullets specially designed for pocket pistols hit the black mummy's body with constant crisp sounds, and sparks flew everywhere, but the actual shooting effect was not even a scratch. The black mummy is still slowly walking towards Kaylan. At its current speed, Kaylan can use the console in the middle of the cockpit to play Chine column with it. If it maintains the state, even if he waits until the plane lands, he probably won't be able to touch Kaylan. However, just when Kaylan was about to do this, he suddenly discovered that most of the bullets fired were actually attached to the black mummy's body. Not only these bullets, but also the thrown joystick trembled on the ground and slid towards the black mummy little by little. Although most of the pocket pistol in Ian's hand is made of polymer material, there are still many metal parts in it. He can clearly feel a suction force that is gradually increasing. This guy can produce magnetism. And the magnetism is still increasing. Kaylan couldn't help but think of a character called Magneto in the superhero movie, but compared with Magneto, who can manipulate the magnetic field at will, the one in front of him is the black mummy's ability seems to be imperfect. It is simply like a magnet, spontaneously attracting metal objects around it. But the problem was that the magnetism attached to his body was rapidly increasing. After sliding on the ground for more than 10 centimeters, the joystick finally flew up and stuck to the outside of its calf with a bang sound. Kaylan couldn't help but glance at the big screen in the cockpit, and saw that the transport plane that was originally flying smoothly had shown signs of losing control. It was obvious that the gradually strengthening magnetism of the black mummy affected the components in the console. This in turn affects the aircraft's automatic cruise system. If you cut the perspective to the outside of the aircraft at this time, you can see that the entire Hercules transport aircraft is scurrying up and down in the clouds like a headless fly. If an uninformed person sees this scene, they may think that it was the pilot of this plane who was illegally driving drunk. Although under the coordination of the automatic balance system, the cockpit and first-class cabin will not shake like the pirate ship in the amusement park, but in this case, there is no way for Linkheiming and the others to escape from the plane by parachuting. If you jump out of the cabin with such severe shaking, there is a high probability that you will hit the rear wing or be sucked into the engine turbine. Even with the relatively safest tail hatch, It is possible. It was sucked into the turbulence generated by the tail wing. Well-trained special service operators like Lin Keiming and others may still have a certain chance of survival, but apart from their higher IQs, the physical fitness of these experts from the institute is no different from ordinary people. The vast majority of them, none of them had any experience in skydiving. In this case, asking experts with zero skydiving experience to jump out of the hatch is tantamount to asking them to commit suicide. Kaylan couldn't drag him away. The magnetism on the black mummy would only become stronger and stronger. By the time the console was completely scrapped, it would be too late. He took a deep breath, lowered his body weight slightly, and then rushed towards the black mummy. Just when he was still 3 meters away from the black mummy, he made a sudden stop, turning the forward force into a torque, turning in a 360-degree circle on the spot, and then dragged the blood behind him. The giant sword was swung out with all its strength. Bang! A loud noise sounded in the cockpit, and the giant sword in Ian's hand smashed firmly on the black mummy's shoulder and neck. But this sword could neither split the black mummy's chest nor smash its shoulders. The blade of the giant sword could not even cut into the black mummy's body. Kaylan knew very well how terrifying the power of the sword was, not to mention the black mummy who was half a body shorter in front of him. Although the mummy's body was unscathed, the floor of the cockpit could not withstand this force. A burst of strength, and it collapsed directly. Even if there was an explosion-proof hatch in front of Kaylan that even a heavy machine gun couldn't penetrate, it should have been cut open with this sword. But now it was as if he was holding a hammer and hammering the nail of the black mummy into the floor. As for the nail itself, it did not cause any damage. So hard. With a thought in Ian's mind, the blade of the giant sword instantly turned into a jagged shape and spun at high speed. The original broad-blade giant sword with a simple shape instantly turned into a chain sword filled with loyalty. The high-speed rotating saw teeth collided with the black mummy's neck, causing a tooth-piercing friction sound. A large number of sparks shot out, covering almost the entire upper body of the mummy, but only Kaylan, the chain sword in his hand, can't be pushed in even a minute and a half. In terms of hardness alone, the body of this black mummy has surpassed the 100% pure nino alloy. If this guy is dragging such a body around, then the strength of its limbs is so terrifying, Kaylan simply can't believe it. Dare to believe. At least there is no problem in dismantling this transport plane with bare hands. The black mummy did not climb out of the pit immediately. It just slowly raised its arm and grabbed the chain sword on its shoulder. The saw chain at the blade suddenly stopped. Kaylan was shocked and quickly took back the chain sword. Fortunately, the weapon condensed from the living armor could deform at any time, and he broke free from the opponent's hand. The attack cannot break through the defense, and my strength is completely at a disadvantage. The only advantage is that my movement speed is much higher than this guy, but I must deal with this guy in the shortest possible time, otherwise the increasing magnetism will destroy the entire cockpit. Ian's brain was working rapidly, and his eyes were constantly scanning the surroundings, trying to find a way to get rid of the black mummy in a short time. P.S. Thanks to Soapyu for the 1,500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 633. No, that's not right. Kaylan suddenly had a thought in his head. He didn't need to kill the black mummy. As long as he could get it out of the transport plane, he could still achieve his original purpose. As for how to kill them or capture them alive as research samples, that is a question that the Undead Crew Association and the military need to consider. The slow movement of the black mummy means that Kaylan has a lot of room for maneuver. From the current point of view, it should be the simplest and crudest way to open a large enough opening in the cockpit and then throw the black mummy out. The most effective way. The cockpit of the Hercules transport aircraft is located between the middle layer and the upper layer. Whether you go up or down, there is a long distance to open a direct passage to the outside of the aircraft. Only directly in front of the aircraft nose is the direction closest to the external space in a straight line. This place should be the porthole of the cockpit on other aircraft, but the porthole directly in front of the Hercules is blocked by streamlined metal armor. Instead, the interior is composed of hundreds of display units, covering the driver's side. A hemispherical screen covers most of the cabin. The 64 compound-eye omnidirectional cameras installed outside the fuselage can transmit the outside scene to the screen intact, acting as the cancelled portholes. K-LAN only needed to cut through these screens and the casing and armor behind the screens to break a big hole in the fuselage and throw the Black Mummy out of the cockpit. Without further ado, K-LAN rushed towards the nose of the aircraft dragging his chain sword. This opening cannot be opened directly in front of the nose, otherwise the strong airflow pouring in will form a loop in the cockpit, which will instead suppress K-Ian's next move. Only by opening a hole on the side and using the high-speed airflow outside and the pressure difference in the cabin to create a suction force can the Black Mummy be pushed out of the cabin. After choosing a position, K-LAN started the engine of the chain sword again and smashed the sword towards the screen. The screen that was originally like a transparent porthole suddenly went black, and the lines of broken glass quickly spread to the surroundings along the point where K-LAN hit it. Countless pieces of glass and metal spurted out from the impact point, and the rotating chain cut in without any hindrance. However, the chain sword only cut into half a meter, and K-LAN felt an ever-changing resistance from the tip of the sword. Passed on. He suddenly realized a problem. The cockpit and first-class cabin are equipped with automatic balancing devices. The automatic balancing device can keep the space inside the cabin stable when the aircraft body makes various flipping, diving, rising, and other movements. To achieve this, one thing must be met in the design: the outer shell of the fuselage and the internal cabin are separated and movable. This resulted in that even if K-LAN split the inner bulkhead, the corresponding aircraft shell was constantly changing. Not only was it impossible to open a stable passage, but it would also cause serious damage to the aircraft body. Damn, this is so exciting. K-LAN had no choice but to return to the console and turn off the cockpit's automatic balancing device. Suddenly, the entire cockpit instantly turned into a roller coaster. No, even the most thrilling roller coaster in the old era is probably not as good as this transport plane tumbling in the real sky. If I really had to find something to compare it to, it would be a bit like a drum washing machine with full power. The living armor produced several long barbed nails on the soles of K-Ian's feet, which were like claws on hiking boots. They were firmly dug into the floor of the cockpit, preventing him from rolling along with the cockpit. The Black Mummy's fingers were also inserted into the floor, and with the qualification of being on all fours, it moved closer to K-LAN. The wildly shaking cockpit had no effect on it. K-LAN led the Black Mummy towards the nose of the aircraft with some difficulty. After crossing the dividing line between the ground and the screen, K-LAN had to crush the screen underneath with every step, and then ensure that the spikes on the soles of the feet are fixed on a strong enough steel frame. On the other hand, the magnetic force on the Black Mummy is now strong enough to adsorb its body to the metal ground, no matter how the cockpit is shaken. Will not help. K-LAN originally planned to turn the living armor into a soft whip to drag the Black Mummy out, but it seemed that this method would not work, so he had to change his plan temporarily. He kept raising, smashing, and dragging the chain sword, and the Black Mummy crawling on the ground was constantly closing the distance between it and K-LAN. The Black Mummy was still more than 5 meters away from K-LAN. When they were far away, K-LAN finally stopped what he was doing. He created a trap. He used a chain sword to cut a triangular opening in the bulkhead and the outer shell of the aircraft, but he did not cut it completely, but there was a connecting section left at each corner. Just like the pre-tier opening on the packaging bag. Fortunately, the Black Mummy's IQ was not high. It did not see K-Ian's intention and was still crawling towards K-LAN along the shortest straight line. Finally, when the Black Mummy entered the trap triangle preset by K-LAN, the chain sword in Ian's hand suddenly turned into a long-handled warhammer and hit the Praetor hard. Itch. Bang, stab. The harsh sound of tearing metal came from below, and a light transmitting gap suddenly appeared on the edge of the trap triangle, and a strong suction force continued to come from the gap. A hook rope that was also transformed from living armor shot out from Ian's other hand and was fixed on the top bulkhead. With this hook rope, Lan suddenly swung behind the black mummy and swung the warhammer. Hit it hard again. Crack. One corner of the trap triangle has collapsed, and when the airflow passes through the metal holes on the edge of the crack, it keeps making a sharp and piercing whistling sound. It must be said that the quality of the steel used by the YIP consortium to build the aircraft is really excellent. 2 of the corners have been disconnected, but the entire triangle area still has not fallen off the fuselage. The last one. Lan took 2 steps back, dodged the black mummy's outstretched arm, twisted his waist, and turned to the left rear side of the black mummy. He aimed the warhammer in his hand at the last connection point and swung it violently. Bang! The last support in the triangular area was also lost. The entire triangular steel plate, together with the black mummy lying on the steel plate, was suddenly sucked out of the cabin. Finally it's over. After the giant hammer in Ian's hand broke open the connection point, it turned into an anchor hook and hooked the edge of the breach. This prevented Lan from joining the triangular steel plate and the black mummy being sucked out of the plane. But just when Lan finally breathed a sigh of relief and was about to restart the automatic balancing device, he heard a dull loud noise from outside. This noise was louder than the sound that fell on the back of the aircraft when he jumped. Much bigger. Ian's heart skipped a beat, and a somewhat ominous guess suddenly appeared in his mind. He quickly returned to the console and turned the gimbal camera toward the tail of the plane, and sure enough, after being sucked out of the cabin, the cut triangular steel plate and the black mummy hit the tail of the plane that turned sideways, smashing it. A very conspicuous depression appeared. The black mummy ripped off the steel plate attached to its body, and then stood outside the plane, walking step by step towards the nose of the plane. "It's really a stalker," Lan complained, but the look on his face was very relaxed. Although he did not completely get rid of this monster, his goal was also achieved. "Lin Kaiming, can you hear me?" Lan cut the surveillance camera to the first-class cabin, and saw all the operators of the crisis management department and the researchers and experts looking towards the tail of the plane with panic on their faces. He was obviously shocked by the impact just now. "Yes, I can hear it," Lin Kaiming said loudly. "You have controlled the cockpit, right?" "It's under control for the time being," Lan said. "I can only say that for the time being, we don't have much time left." "What's going on just now?" Lin Kaiming asked impatiently. "Could it be that there's a second person jumping over?" "It's not a gang jumper, it's a black bishop. To be precise, it's a black bishop who has completed the sacrifice. It is outside the cabin now and is approaching me. Do you need us to support you?" Lin Kaiming's expression changed slightly. As the deputy chief of the crisis management department, he certainly knew what the Black Bishop was referring to. He also understood that the Black Bishop who had completed the sacrifice, these few words mean something. "It's useless, even I can't make that thing," Lan refused. He originally wanted to add that you came here to kill someone, but in the end he didn't say it out loud. He was not afraid of hurting the other person's self-esteem, it was just to save time. "Then what do you want us to do?" Lin Kaiming asked again. He also knew in his heart that if there was no urgent task assigned to them, Lan would not contact them in this way. "The number of parachute bags in the cargo hold should be enough for all of you. The task for you and your operators now is to distribute the parachute bags to everyone and teach the researchers how to parachute. Remember, we don't have enough time. More, I can only keep the plane steady temporarily. If that thing reaches the cockpit, you will have no chance to parachute." "Understood," Lin Kaiming responded loudly, and ran towards the cargo hold with several operators. While Kaylan was controlling the plane to keep it flying as smoothly as possible, he glanced at the black mummy's moving speed from time to time to estimate the time it would take to reach the cockpit. Fortunately, the black mummy's movements were still slow. Based on the current speed, Lin Kaiming and the experts from the institute had at least 15 minutes to escape. Although for a person who has never been exposed to skydiving, it may be somewhat difficult to master a new skill in 15 minutes, and it is also an extremely dangerous extreme sport, but there is no other way. Anyway, as long as you don't fall to death or injure your brain, you can still be rescued even if you suffer multiple injuries. Kaylan opened the communication system of the Hercules transport aircraft again and said on the public channel, "I am Kaylan. I have temporarily regained control of the Hercules transport aircraft. I need support." His communication quickly received a reply, "This is the 651st Fighter Group of the 1st Fleet. We are now located 1,100 meters behind you and can provide support at any time. In addition, according to the surveillance images, in Hercules there is an unknown humanoid creature on the back of the transport aircraft slowly approaching the nose of the aircraft. Please pay more attention." "I know, I applied to speak directly to the person in charge of the 1st Fleet," Kaylan said. After a brief silence, a steady voice rang out, "I am the person in charge of the 1st Fleet. How do you need us to support you?" The rear headquarters should also have seen that thing on the back of the transport plane, right? Kaylan asked. "I saw it. That thing is a black bishop, the one who has completed the sacrificial ceremony. His current known ability is that his body strength far exceeds that of Nino Alloy, and he has ever-increasing magnetism, but he seems to have certain flaws in his mobility. The movement speed and movements are relatively slow. As for the intelligence level, it is currently unknown, but I personally judge that this thing is not very smart." "Understood, your report has been delivered to the crew meeting, and the crew meeting requires us to fully cooperate with your plan." "Very good, my plan is very simple. I can't kill this thing, and with the firepower of the few fighter jets following behind, I probably won't be able to destroy it, so let's ignore it for now and focus on rescue operations as our primary goal. I have asked Deputy Chief Lin Kaiming of the Crisis Management Department to take the experts from the Institute to prepare for parachuting. I need fighter jets to ensure the safety of these people when parachuting." At the same time, a medical search and rescue team was immediately organized to enter the White Ridge Mountains to pick up the parachuting personnel. Kaylan said, "I have to mention that most of the people in those institutes are parachuting for the first time. It is expected that there will be many seriously injured people. It is best to send a few empty ships with medical cabins over immediately. Stand by above the mountains. As for the thing on the back of the plane, I will try to take it away from the skydiving area, and then I will leave it to you to deal with. 4 search and rescue teams on standby have already taken planes to your airspace, and a quick response team composed of 16 destroyers will arrive in the White Ridge Mountains in 8 minutes to support search and rescue operations. As for Black Bishop, the main force of the fleet will be responsible for the annihilation operations," the other party replied. "P.S. Thanks to the Reading Giraffe for the 6,500 starting coins, thank you to the book friend 201702202101471010 for the 100 starting coins. P.P.S. Damn it, the countermeasure I originally thought of was to make a hole in the plane to let this guy fall out, but it turned out that you all guessed everything in yesterday's chapter. It's a direct spoiler. The key is that today's chapter has already been. I've come up with a lot of ideas, but it's difficult to make temporary changes. I'm really angry, I have no conscience, I definitely didn't copy the comments. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 634. Kaylan really wanted to say that instead of wasting a lot of energy and ammunition to annihilate this thing, it would be better to keep it as a research sample, and he would definitely get a lot of benefits, but then he thought about it, this thing has too many qualities. Even as a sample, it is a high-risk sample on the same level as Yinglong's egg. Thinking of the numerous past records of those indifferent guys at the institute, Kaylan finally chose to remain silent. I'm tired, let's destroy it, it's better to kill this thing to ashes, so as not to cause any more trouble. Lin Kaiming's actions were quite fast. It took less than 4 minutes to distribute the umbrella bags to everyone. Remember, don't panic when you take off, and you don't have to jump very far. Just be careful not to hit your head on the hatch. Lin Kaiming inspected everyone's parachute bags and taught loudly, "We are now in a the altitude is very safe. Don't rush to open the parachute as soon as you jump out. That will make you get sucked into the airflow generated by the turbine engine. As for the timing of opening the parachute, I will teach you a simple method. After jumping out of the hatch, just count 20 numbers in your mind and then pull the paracord. The parachutes equipped on transport aircraft are full-style emergency life-saving parachutes, not the combat parachutes with extremely high maneuverability specially used by airborne troops. But the full style has the advantage of the full style, that is, the skydiver only needs to master the timing of opening the parachute, and does not need to worry about anything else. Even if the parachute is opened during a high-speed roll, the safety device inside the parachute will help. Skydiver regains balance. There is no need to rush to open the parachute. 20 seconds is just an example. Even if you count to 40, you will still have time to open the parachute. In addition, on the right-hand side is the lock of the main parachute. Just pull it when opening the parachute. If the main parachute fails, if it cannot be opened, then pull the spare umbrella on the left-hand side. Of course, you can pull both of them together, Lin Kaiming said quickly, as long as one of the umbrellas can be opened. There is also the lack of oxygen and extremely cold environment at high altitude. Try to check your equipment and do not expose your skin to prevent frostbite. As for the oxygen supply equipment, I think you will be familiar with these things. I will no need to waste time going into details. Do you have any more questions? Lin Kaiming asked again. If you have any questions, ask them now. You can ask them later after you jump out of the cabin, but no one will have time to help you solve them. The researchers who were all wearing their equipment looked at me and I looked at you, but no one made a sound. This group of people are the best among people with super high IQs, the best students among the best students. Lin Kaiming just explained it briefly, and they have already mastered the essentials of skydiving. If there is any problem, it is probably because of nervousness. It won't be possible to eliminate it for a while, but talking about this problem is like saying it in vain. Lin Kaiming walked around the group again and picked out the older researchers. The operators of the crisis management department took them to skydive. As for himself, he used a safety belt to carry. Nori Drsen is tied to himself. After doing all this, Lin Kaiming gave a thumbs up to the surveillance camera and said, "Everything is ready, you can parachute at any time. Open the emergency hatch in 10 seconds, and the specific timing of the parachute is under your control," Kaylan said, and then glanced at the surveillance camera outside the aircraft. At this moment, the black mummy has already walked half the distance. I give you 5 minutes, and within 5 minutes, everyone must leave the plane. Okay, Lin Kaiming responded. The so-called emergency hatch is an escape passage specially designed for first-class passengers. Generally speaking, in addition to the 2 internal passages at the front and rear, the only entrance to the first-class cabin is the door on the port side of the fuselage, connected to the suspended boarding corridor of the airport, but this door is narrow and cannot be opened during flight for safety reasons. When this emergency escape passage is opened, first-class passengers can enter the soft passage through the secret door on the floor and slide into the decompression chamber. The decompression chamber will help the skydiver adjust the air pressure in his body so that he will not jump out after jumping out. Accidents such as internal organ bleeding or cerebral hemorrhage occur in the cabin. After all, the air pressure inside the aircraft is much higher than outside. The higher the flight altitude, the greater the air pressure difference. The carpet in the first-class corridor was lifted up, and the floor below moved slowly, revealing a 2-meter square passage. Researchers wearing protective equipment like spacesuits jumped into the passage one by one, like a slide. They also slid into the decompression chamber below. Lynn Keiming and Dr. Norrison were the last two to jump down. As soon as they jumped into the passage, the trap door above closed again. The air pressure in the decompression chamber was dropping rapidly. According to the operating regulations, this depressurization process must take more than 10 minutes, but they obviously didn't have that much time. Lynn Keiming had to use violence to pry open the control panel and remove the restriction valve, increasing the pressure reduction speed to the fastest speed. Everyone invariably experienced some discomfort similar to altitude sickness, but no matter what, it was much better than jumping out of the plane directly. If an elderly person like Dr. Norrison was thrown directly outside the plane, even with the protection of a skydiving suit, he would immediately fall into shock. Decompression sickness is not a joke. Lynn Keiming stared at the air pressure valve, while occasionally glancing at the countdown timer designed on the watch. When the air pressure in the decompression chamber was almost the same as the external air pressure, the countdown timer only had the last 110 seconds left. He pushed open the hatch in the belly of the plane. Since the air pressure in the decompression cabin was the same as the outside, everyone did not feel the strong suction. Only the biting cold wind kept pouring in from outside the cabin. In an instant, a thin layer of white frost condensed on the wall of the decompression chamber. An operator from the crisis management department took the lead in jumping out of the cabin as a demonstration. "Do what we just taught you, hurry up," Lynn Keiming shouted hoarsely. He had to shout loudly. Without a communication device, his ears were filled with the sound of howling wind. If he wanted to communicate with each other, he had to do it by roaring. A young researcher jumped out of the cabin second, followed by the third, fourth. 60 seconds left. Hurry. But at this moment, a fat researcher stopped at the door of the cabin. He grabbed the pull ring above his head with both hands, but he was unwilling to jump out of the cabin. "What's going on? Do you have a problem? Why didn't you just say you had a problem?" Lynn Keiming unbuckled the seat belt between himself and Dr. Norrison, walked quickly to the fat man's side, and asked loudly. The fat man turned his head and said with a look of fear, but his voice was too soft. In this environment, Lynn Keiming couldn't hear what he was saying. "Do you dance by yourself, or should I help you dance?" Lynn Keiming asked again. There were only 45 seconds left. Calculated based on the frequency of jumping one person in 5 seconds, the time was very limited. As a result, 3 people's time was wasted just on this person. The fat man shook his head vigorously, and the tears and snot that was thrown out all got stuck on the inside of the transparent mask of the helmet. Without saying a word, Lynn Keiming kicked him on the back and kicked him out of the cabin. Even if this person was unwilling to jump out because there was a problem with his parachute or protective equipment or for some other reason, Lynn Keiming didn't have time to take care of it. He couldn't let others lose the chance to escape by parachuting just for his sake. Even if the fat man didn't survive after being kicked out of the cabin, it would be better than him blocking the cabin door and continuing to waste precious time. The loss of a researcher is still within the tolerable range. Group of 2. No. Group of 3. Jump quickly. There are only 30 seconds left, Lynn Keiming shouted, while pulling Dr. Norrison, who was standing on one side, at a loss, over again, and once again he was tied in front of himself with a seat belt. When he and Dr. Norrison finally jumped out of the cabin, Lynn Keiming glanced at the countdown on his watch. There were exactly 2 seconds left. He raised his head and looked up. He saw that the Hercules transport plane was quickly moving away, and a flight formation of more than a dozen fighter jets was closely following behind the Hercules. Not long after they jumped out of the cabin, these fighter jets finally began to fly. "Start shooting at the things on the back of the transport plane." From Lynn Keiming's perspective, he couldn't see what the Black Bishop summoned, but from the perspective of the fighter pilots, the monster's appearance could be clearly seen. It has been confirmed that all the rescue targets have left the aircraft and have switched to the third combat formation. The first detachment is preparing to carry out a delaying attack to delay as much time as possible for our personnel on board. In addition, we should pay attention not to damage the structure of the transport aircraft as much as possible. The first detachment is ready. The Type 24 non-lethal bombs have been loaded. Requesting to fire. Permission to fire. With an order, the 4 fighter jets on the right wing of the formation approached the Hercules transport aircraft at the same time, and the cannons mounted on the nose began to fire wildly at the Black Mummy. Type 24 non-anti-personnel ammunition is a special ammunition used to hunt large indigenous creatures. The warhead will automatically split after a period of time after exiting the barrel, releasing the highly viscous compressed resin inside, the same sticky foam that K-LAN once used. Compared with grenades, the blocking ability is twice as strong, but the lethality has also been increased by several levels. Although the name is called a non-lethal bomb, if it hits a human being, the high-speed flying liquid resin can easily penetrate the fragile human body and mince all the internal organs near the wound. This non-lethal is just it is for those large indigenous creatures with rough skin and thick flesh that cannot even be penetrated by bullets. Even the metal shell on the back of the Hercules transport aircraft became pitted under the impact of these compressed resins, and the impact force was evident. At least more than 2,000 rounds of Type 24 non-lethal bombs hit the target, and the white sticky resin almost wrapped the entire Black Mummy. It looked exactly like the scene in some heavy-duty books. This amount of shot would probably make it difficult for a Thunder Beast to move, but the Black Mummy's movements were not affected in any way. Although its movements are slow, it is almost unstoppable. This is impossible. I have never seen a creature hit by so many Type 24s and still keep its movements unaffected, exclaimed a pilot who fired. To be honest, I haven't seen it either. The last time I used Type 24 ammunition, I helped the ground troops suppress an SP-type mutant. Although the effect was minimal, it could still play a blocking role, said another pilot. If K-LAN heard the conversation between them, he would probably only let out 2 helpless smiles. Even a metal body with a hardness higher than nano alloy can be driven by brute force, so a little bit hell if sticky resin even works. K-LAN estimated that even if this thing was sunk into a pool filled with sticky compressed resin, it could easily climb out. The pilots of these fighter jets still underestimate this guy's physical strength. That was something summoned as a sacrifice by the 3-headed seed of corrosion. The Black Mummy was less than 15 meters away from the cockpit. K-LAN glanced at the camera at the rear of the aircraft. The parachutes of Linkiming and others had all been opened. A series of parachutes painted in eye-catching orange floated behind the transport aircraft. Slowly the ground fell towards the White Ridge Mountains below. The formation of fighter jets following behind was divided into 2 groups. One group continued to follow its transport plane, and the other group began to hover in place to provide protection for the parachuting people. The distance is almost 2 kilometers, it should be enough. K-LAN took a deep breath. Now, it was his turn to abandon the plane and escape. It's a pity that the consortium didn't add a self-destruction device to this plane, otherwise it could at least test the physical strength of that thing, K-LAN said as he called up the unloading program on the console, lighting up a whole row of virtual buttons one by one. The cargo bay door of the Hercules opened directly backward, and the unlocked containers slid out of the cargo bay one by one, falling into the mountainous area below like bombs. These containers are not equipped with parachute devices, and K-LAN is not sure how many pieces of precision equipment can be used when they are recovered after being thrown away like this, but at least, it is better than being buried with the transport plane. After unloading the cargo hold, K-LAN adjusted the plane's flight angle so that the nose of the plane was at a dive angle of about 30 degrees, and then locked the driving program. In this way, after flying forward for a certain distance, this Hercules transport aircraft will hit the ground. Ignoring the frantic sirens, K-LAN quickly rushed to the edge of the breach in the cockpit and jumped down. At the same time, the black mummy on the top of the nose also jumped down after him. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 636. I knew it looking at the black figure that was less than 30 meters away from him and falling towards the ground at high speed. Kaylan sighed helplessly. Then, he adjusted his posture in the air, stretched out his hand, waved it towards the black mummy, and mouthed, "Bye-bye." The next second, a pair of gliding wings with a wingspan of more than 20 meters spread out from the back of the living armor. Ian's falling momentum suddenly slowed down, and the black mummy, which was still above him, quickly passed him. Continue to fall straight down. I didn't expect that I can fly. After discovering that living armor can change its function on its own, Kaylan naturally will not continue to foolishly choose a hard landing. Although a hard landing is faster, the buffering blood mist emitted by the active armor cannot be 100% offset. The impact force when landing, even if the remaining impact force is only 1% or even 1,000th of the original, it is definitely not a comfortable experience for Kaylan. Since he could land safely, who would just fall to the ground like a fool? Oh, there are still fools. Kaylan glanced directly below. Under the influence of gravity acceleration, the black mummy hit the mountainside of a mountain like a cannonball, raising dust, mist, and gravel all over the sky. Immediately afterwards, there was a loud rumbling sound above the snow line. First huge blocks of snow rolled down from above, and then there were huge white waves like mudslides. From Ian's height, it was as if the snow line that had been maintained at a fixed height suddenly collapsed and began to move downwards. Good guy, the avalanche was smashed. Fortunately, there is no ARC military base or transfer station at the foot of the peaks that caused the avalanche. The only unlucky ones who suffered from this unreasonable disaster were probably the indigenous creatures living in the valley. The fighter jets that followed immediately abandoned the Hercules transport plane and flew towards the mountain peak where the black mummy landed. Arriving faster than the fighter jets were the missiles launched by the fighter jets, with dozens of missiles trailing blazing white tails. Yan directly crashed into the white waves, setting off huge sprays. Boom 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 boom. A series of violent explosions continuously shocked Ian's eardrums, and the surging air waves pushed him to sway in mid-air, like a small boat in the stormy sea. Following the aftermath, a heat wave carrying an extremely high radiation dose spread. The missiles launched by these fighter jets were all equipped with tactical nuclear warheads. The yield of these dozens of rounds would not only melt the avalanche, but even move them. It's probably more than enough to level this mountain. After launching the nuclear missiles, the First Fleet's fighter jets pulled directly to the high altitude, leaving Kaylan alone to drift slowly towards the valley. I think the pilots of these fighter jets must have obtained permission from the immortal crew to use these weapons without scruples. As providers of living armor, the immortal crew knew of course that the aftermath of a nuclear explosion would not be affected at all. It will not cause harm to Kaylan. But Lin Kaiming and the experts from the Institute, 2 kilometers away from here, were in a miserable situation. The nuclear explosion almost triggered an avalanche in a small half of the White Ridge Mountains, and the landing point of Lin Kaiming and his parachute was also within the scope of the avalanche. The only thing they are thankful for is the life-saving equipment they wear. When encountering natural disasters such as earthquakes and avalanches, it will quickly release an elastic sphere with a diameter of 2 meters and filled with inert gas like a car airbag. As long as the sphere does not being squeezed by the avalanche, they only had to huddle inside and wait for the rescue team to dig out. Casualties will definitely occur, but for the crew, at least the number of casualties is within the tolerable range, then the rescue operation is successful. In their eyes, a human life is indeed just a number. Even a valuable talent like a researcher is only a slightly larger number than a civilian. If I can't become one of them, maybe one day I will become one of these numbers. Kaylan thought silently, no. Even if I successfully enter the crew guild, I may not be able to ensure your own absolute safety. After all, my predecessor in this seat, Chiron, is a living example. What's more, Kaylan is completely unsure whether the promise to join the crew is a carrot hanging on the donkey's head. Thinking about it this way, the prophet's defection seems to be reasonable. After all, not everyone will willingly work for a group of people who have been hiding behind the scenes. The reason why Kaylan chose to cooperate with them was not because he did not have the opportunity to defect like the prophet, but because he had not yet figured out the true purpose of this group of people in the undead crew. If what they did was really for the survival of the human race, then Kaylan wouldn't mind being in the same camp as them. At least it would be better than that crazy heretic sect that had almost lost its humanity. The glider transformed from the living armor took Kaylan to a mountain peak adjacent to the nuclear explosion site. Due to the high temperature generated by the avalanche and nuclear explosion, the remaining snow on the mountain peak had almost completely melted and turned into a cloud of ice. The steamy mountain spring rushes towards the valley. At a glance, the surrounding mountain peaks are like this: the white snow melts, exposing dark black rugged rocks, and the majestic water flows down the gaps in the cliffs of the mountain, and gathers into another place at the lower ground. An artificial hot spring in one place. Unfortunately, these man-made hot springs are fatal to ordinary people. The heat brought by nuclear explosions also brings dangerous radiation. Even if these missiles are only equipped with tactical-grade nuclear warheads with a small impact range, the radiation left in this mountainous area will take at least several months to dissipate. The first fleet quickly locked onto Kaylan, who was standing on the top of the mountain. A large Albatross command and early warning aircraft flew over and hovered directly above Kaylan. A suspended platform used to transport people to and from the aircraft slowly lowered from the belly of the Albatross aircraft. In addition to two Marines wearing dark green power armor and almost armed to the teeth, there was another Marine on the platform. A strong man wearing a military coat with a fur collar and half his face covered in mechanical prosthetics. "I am the current commander of the First Fleet, CAOGE Mr. Kaylan. This should not be the first time we have met." The other party took the initiative to greet Kaylan. The multifunctional camera lens in the right artificial eye continued to zooming and rotating. Although his left eye made of flesh and blood was always looking at Kaylan, the prosthetic eye had already looked at Kaylan from head to toe. "Yes, but it was just a one-sided relationship last time. I didn't expect to meet again on such an occasion," Kaylan said politely. The First Fleet is the Noah's Ark First Cruise Fleet, which is the fleet that was originally ordered to conquer the prehistoric species Leviathan. The previous fleet commander died on the ship, using the First Fleet's flagship Kaylan to break through the physical defense of Leviathan's energy shield, which gave other warships the opportunity to pour firepower into this ancient beast. Vital parts, thereby killing it completely. The person who took over this fleet was CAOGE. "In the Leviathan incident, thanks to you for sending out the information in time, otherwise, we might have to pay a higher price," CAOGE said sincerely. He stretched out an arm and pulled Kaylan up. A suspended platform. When holding CAOGE's hand, Kaylan could clearly feel that the layer of skin was simulated human skin made of special silicone. Under the simulated skin were flexible fillers and mechanical joints that perfectly simulated the human skeleton. More than half of CAOGE's body is made up of cyborg prosthetic body, and the proportion of the prosthetic body far exceeds that of Leighton, and is almost as good as Victoria. Hound once told them that this new member of the First Fleet, the commander, was an ace fighter pilot when he was young. During a battle with insect native creatures, he went deep into the enemy formation and directly killed the insect queen, who was under heavy protection. His car was also used by the insect swarm for air defense. It was sprayed with acid and crashed directly into the sea of insects. If it weren't for the fact that this insect swarm is a typical hive consciousness creature with only one brain like the insect queen, and the individual does not have any self-thinking, I am afraid that he would have been eaten up by the swarm of insects. But even so, when the reinforcements found him, he only had less than half of his body left. The word miracle can only be used to describe his survival. "We are just trying to survive," Kaylan smiled modestly. "If the First Fleet hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid we would have been buried in that place." The suspended platform quickly returned to the albatross level. CAOGE did not ask even half a word about the active armor on Kaylan. Given his level and authority, he probably had some understanding of this kind of thing. Even if he doesn't understand, he knows very well what things can be asked about, and what things are best treated as if they have never been seen before. CAOGE had someone send Kaylan a complete set of clothes, including underwear. Judging from the style of the clothes, they should be the training uniforms of fleet officers. Although not as handsome as regular uniforms, they are more comfortable and practical. How's the situation? That thing is probably still alive, right? Kaylan zipped up his fleece jacket and quickly walked into the Albatross command room. Still alive. CAOGE looked at the big table in the center of the command room and said solemnly. On the table was a mountain model simulated with holographic projection. Kaylan could tell at a glance that the peak in the middle was the one the Black Mummy had just hit. It's just that the peak that was originally more than 4,000 meters above sea level is now only 2/3 of its original height. And at the center of this mountain peak, there is an eye-catching red dot, which is flashing moment by moment. The target initially hit the mountain about 80 meters deep. I ordered the bombardment with tactical nuclear warheads. It almost absorbed the power of dozens of nuclear warheads, and the main body was also bombarded nearly 600 meters deep into the mountain. But according to the information fed back by the detection instrument, the target did not stop moving. CAOGE explained to Kaylan. However, the magnetism on the target seems to stop strengthening after it increases to a certain intensity. My subordinates calculated. We then concluded that as long as we keep a distance of more than 300 meters from it, the electronic equipment on our vehicle will not be affected. Then what is it doing now? The target is traveling in the mountain at a very slow speed, but this slowness is relative. In fact, its speed has not changed from when it was on the Hercules transport aircraft. In other words, those hard mountains cannot. It will cause no hindrance to the target opposite the holographic projection, a young staff officer said. Even the sticky resin that can stick to the Thunder Beast has no effect on this thing. You can't expect the stone to stop it, Kaylan said. In which direction is it moving? There are no rules. The moving direction of the target in the mountain is always changing, and we haven't figured out the rules yet, the staff officer replied. Mark the movement trajectory of this thing on the holographic projection and let me take a look. Kaylan looked up and said to the staff officer as if he had thought of something. Good. The staff officer immediately clicked a few times on the control panel at the edge of the table, and a zigzag line that was also red, crooked, and seemed almost irregular appeared behind the flashing red dot. At every turning point, the staff officer also carefully marked the time. Judging from this movement trajectory, the Black Mummy changed its direction at least a dozen times within the mountain, 3 of which were almost 180-degree turns, making it completely impossible to figure out its motives. But Ian's eyes lit up. He stretched out his hands, and the index finger of his left hand moved along the trajectory, while his right hand moved back and forth in the airspace above the mountain. I understand, Kaylan nodded. The thing this guy is chasing is me. As Kaylan said, the reason why the Black Mummy changed its direction several times in the mountain was because Kaylan was floating in the sky at that time, and its position kept changing. When he landed, a long straight line immediately appeared in his movement trajectory. This straight line was facing the mountain peak where Kaylan landed. Now, the Black Mummy is moving in the direction where the albatross is hovering, digging a diagonal upward passage in the mountain. Move 15 kilometers west. CAOGE frowned and immediately ordered. As the position of the albatross changed, the Black Mummy inside the mountain also immediately changed its direction. The moment this thing was summoned, its target should have been locked. I think if I don't kill it, it will chase me to the end of the world, Kaylan said to CAOGE helplessly. P.S. The airbag prototype mentioned in the article is derived from the G3 escape airbag ball that appeared many times in The Wandering Earth. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 637. But judging from the physical strength of the target, I'm afraid conventional means cannot destroy it, the staff officer said with a confused expression. Among the conventional weapons deployed in the fleet, the only ones more powerful than tactical nuclear warheads are the plasma main guns on heavy cruisers. But judging from the current scraping performance of tactical nuclear warheads, even if plasma cannons are used, the results are probably the same. Kaylan even began to wonder if the Black Mummy also carried something similar to a meme. If Serapha's entry is cognition is contagion, then this thing's entry should be indestructible. The core temperature of a nuclear explosion can even reach hundreds of millions of degrees Celsius. In this environment, the Black Mummy, they are all unscathed. Even if it is launched into the sun, it will still not be harmed. I have an idea, another staff officer said. Find a way to launch the target into low Earth orbit. In a vacuum environment, it has no way to borrow power, and it has no power source of its own. It can only continue to move along the orbiting the Earth is almost equivalent to permanent imprisonment, just like Kaz. Kaz is a prehistoric creature located in the low Earth orbit of Alpha Star. When humans discovered it, they almost mistaken it for an asteroid captured by the gravity of Alpha Star, but further research, however, they discovered that this was a supergiant beast that had fallen into a long slumber. It had been sleeping for so long that its body had already shown signs of petrification, and only a trace of life that was extremely difficult to detect remained deep in its body. According to expert speculation, it is difficult for the prehistoric species Kaz to wake up from its slumber. Although it is still alive, all that remains is an ember of life, which cannot burn into a raging fire again. Can only gradually extinguish and cool down as time goes by, until it completely turns into a cold stone. This staff officer's proposal was obviously based on the situation of the prehistoric species Kazi, who wanted to exile the Black Mummy into the vacuum of space. I don't think this is a good idea. Kaylan shook his head. Don't forget, the body of this thing has its own magnetism. Although its magnetism is no longer enhanced, but based on this, we cannot be sure. It has no power source of its own, and no one can guarantee that it will become the second Kaz. And there are too many unstable factors in low Earth orbit. Even if it is monitored 24 hours a day, it will be difficult to make people aware of it. Rest assured. Indeed, CAOGE nodded. We still know too little about the target. It is really not a wise choice to throw it into space so hastily. How about, let the people from the Institute handle this thing, the staff officer said cautiously. I don't like those people in the Institute, CAOGE said very directly. What's more, the Institute has encountered changes now, and I'm afraid I don't have the energy to deal with this thing. Moreover, even if it is left to them, they would propose moving the target to an underground ice house, which I absolutely cannot accept. They dare to put any dangerous things on the Ark. How on earth do these lunatics put the safety of the people at all? As the commander of the First Fleet, CAOGE obviously knows the inside story of the mimetic infection incident, and judging from his words, he is also quite dissatisfied with the Institute's long-standing behavior and attitude. Just open your mouth and spray it dirty. In fact, not only CAOGE, but also most people in the military were quite unhappy with what the Institute was doing, a privileged organization that could ignore the laws of Ark to a certain extent, and the military, which is the largest violent organization on Ark. There will definitely be more friction between the two, not less. It's not a problem to drag it on like this. Let me find someone to wipe my ass, Kaylan said to CAOGE. Commander, do you have any communication equipment that you can lend me? Yes, CAOGE handed a microphone with a dialing function to Kaylan. This phone can directly contact the entire fleet, or it can also communicate with people on the Ark through the transfer station. However, who are you looking for? The guy from the crew club. After Kaylan finished speaking, under CAOGE's somewhat stunned eyes, he dialed the emergency communication number Pan left for him. Yo yo yo, let me guess, is there someone who has taken off his clothes and wants me to help wipe his butt? The call was answered almost as soon as it was pulled out, without even going through the transfer station. Transfer of personnel. On the other end of the receiver was Pan's voice that was mixed with yin and yang. The volume of the microphone was turned up slightly, and Pan's voice was not quiet, so that Caoge, who was standing next to him, also heard Pan's voice. The look of astonishment in Caoge's eyes became deeper and deeper, with a strong hint of suspicion added to it. As a senior ARC officer who had dealt with the undead crew several times, he couldn't imagine it at all. A member of the crew would say something like this in such a tone. On the other end of the phone, is he really a big shot in the undead crew? Why does it feel like the person who answered the phone is an extremely young and arrogant boy, even much younger than the ruin hunter named Kaylan in front of him? Although Caoge knew that the age of the members of the Immortal Crew Association could not be judged by their voices, the members of the Crew Association that he came into contact with were all taciturn and calm, and the first sentence the other person said when he answered the phone, completely subverting this fixed image in Caoge's mind. He was confused, but he didn't dare to ask. He knew that Kaylan had no need to joke with him about this kind of thing. In other words, the other end of the phone was indeed a member of the Immortal Crew Association. Did you call the surveillance camera in the early warning command plane? Kaylan asked angrily. Logically speaking, it takes at least a few seconds of processing time at the transfer station to connect the communication signal back to the ARC, but the phone it was connected almost instantly. Moreover, I just said the word wipe my ass 10 seconds ago. I have every reason to believe that you have been watching me since I boarded this albatross. Wait for me to call you, right? As soon as Kaylan said these words, Caoge suddenly raised his head, just in time to see the 3 closed-circuit cameras in the command room all turned in this direction, and the indicator light next to the lens was flashing with a bright red light, although these were just a few lifeless cameras, but for some reason, Caoge felt an indescribable majesty. This is a feeling of being watched by a superior. Caoge has been interviewed twice by the undead crew. Although he said it was an interview, in fact, he had never seen the true appearance of the crew members. They appeared in the form of mechanical puppets. Mechanical puppets are also inanimate dead objects, but Caoge did not dare to look at them at all, and on these cameras, Caoge actually produced a feeling of déjà vu. He knew that this was most likely due to his own psychological effects, but since he felt this way, it meant that he had actually believed the identity of the person on the other end of the phone. A certain big shot of the crew was, at this moment, watch everything in this command room. But Kaylan didn't seem to care about his image at all. While grabbing the microphone and talking to the other party, he sat down on the edge of the table. Even the holographic projection on the table was blocked by him. Now that you know everything, I won't talk nonsense. Let me tell you straight, I can't solve this thing. If you have any ideas, just do it quickly. If you don't want to take care of it, then I won't take care of it either. Anyway, with the speed of this thing, it can't pose any threat to me, Kaylan said. Are you just going to show off now? There was a hint of ridicule in Pan's tone. I thought you would try a few more plans. This doesn't seem like your style. What can I do if I don't destroy it? A nuclear explosion with hundreds of millions of degrees of heat can't do anything to this thing, so what can I do? You can't do anything about it, but there is one person beside you who can easily deal with it. Pan deliberately slowed down his tone and said meaningfully. The moment he said these words, Ian's heart beat a few beats faster, but then he immediately controlled his body and tried his best to make himself look normal. The person next to me, who are you talking about? The commander of the First Fleet. You are good at pretending to be dumbfounded, but when both you and I know the answer, is there any point in doing so? Pan said with a smile. His tone seemed very relaxed. I don't understand what you mean. Kaylan shook his head. I really don't understand. You guy, You're an old double standard. You obviously can't stand the fact that the Institute brought all kinds of dangerous specimens to the Ark and stored them in the underground icehouse, but you brought the most dangerous thing to the Ark. In terms of destructiveness, it is estimated that all the collections in the entire icehouse combined are not as much as 1/10,000th of hers, right? The entire command room fell into a strange silence. Ian's face was sullen, and no one could see his expression clearly. Caoge looked at Lan in confusion, and then raised his head to look at the ceiling. Camera, as for the staff officers, they are complete outsiders, not even qualified to interrupt. The silence lasted for a full minute. During this minute, Pan also made no sound. If you don't want the Ark to be destroyed, it's better not to disturb her, Lan said solemnly. I know she is dangerous, but at least I can still control her. Do you really think you can control her? Pan's voice seemed to have been stripped of all emotion, sounding like a cold mechanical synthesized voice, just based on those books, movies, animations, and what it means to her. A simple and boring video game. Why don't you play a training game here? Are you planning to train a being with the power to destroy the world into a god-sister with the attributes of a two-dimensional abandoned house? She once told me that she wanted to experience life as a human being, Lan said. Then do you believe her? I have to believe it, Lan said honestly. Yes, he had to believe that rather than saying that he had controlled Ze-Lugo, it was better that Ze-Lugo was cooperating with him. As long as Ze-Lugo's mind changed, he would have no power to stop her. Pan is right, she is far more dangerous than all the collections in the underground icehouse of the Institute put together. 10,000 times. Maybe more. Actually, you did the right thing. What Lan didn't expect was that Pan's attitude suddenly changed 180 degrees. 1 second he was questioning Lan, but the next second he was questioning compliment. The way you chose to deal with it is the most correct among countless possibilities, at least it seems so for now. So, the immortal crew will not interfere with this matter for the time being. You can continue to train her in the direction of the abandoned house. However, I suggest that you take her into the cosplay pit. It is rare to have such a good foundation. I guess she can play any role in cos. Can it be restored perfectly? If I guessed correctly, she should have the ability to change her form at will, right? Pan said. Do you have a serious illness? Lan couldn't help complaining, but the conversation between him and Pan made Caoge on the side feel frightened. He always felt that he had overheard it. What an extremely important secret, and this secret seems to be related to the survival of the entire Ark and even all mankind. I shouldn't be silenced, right? Caoge suddenly felt regretful. He regretted that he should not have listened to Ian's call out of curiosity, but should have stayed as far away as Lan dialed. The further away, the better. I'm just a suggestion, Pan said nonchalantly. Back to the topic. If you want to completely eliminate that stupid thing crashing in the mountain below, you should be able to do it easily with the help of her power, even if no matter how high that guy's physical strength is, he can't withstand the cutting on the spatial level. Can I ask a question? Just ask, I'll answer as many as I can. Pan was very generous. When did you discover her existence? From the first day you brought her back to the Ark, Pan said. Chiron told you? No, Chiron is very trustworthy. He did not betray you, but, on this ship, nothing can be hidden from the eyes of the crew. Nothing can be hidden from the eyes of the crew, but what about the Prophet? Lan retorted. I haven't finished speaking, and you interrupted me so hastily. Ahem, I'll say it again, on this ship, nothing can be hidden from the eyes of the crew, except people's hearts. Okay, so you have figured out her abilities. In my impression, except for me, Zofia and the people from the Hunting God hunting group, no one should have had close contact with her, right? Rely on data to make inferences. The most important source of data comes from the puppet individual that was eliminated by you. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 638. But. Kaylan hesitated for a moment, then continued, "Aren't you worried that sending her to the battlefield will cause the situation to develop in an uncontrollable direction? With her abilities, we can't control her. What we can do is guide her," Pan said. "No matter how long a ferocious beast is kept in a cage, the hunting instinct in its blood will not change because of humans. She disappeared after being fed, not to mention that she was created for the purpose of being a weapon. Arms. That's right, you have to understand that she is a weapon used to kill. This is like human sexual desire. If it is not released, it will cause problems." Pan's metaphor, it's a bit obscene, but there's nothing wrong with the meaning. If a weapon is kept in a warehouse and is not used, it will only be rusted and scrapped, but a weapon with self-awareness cannot be treated in this way. In fact, unless it is absolutely necessary, the crew does not want to disturb her daily life, but in this current situation, if she does not use her ability to solve the problem. "Even you guys can't deal with that guy below," Kaylan couldn't help but interject. Although he didn't know the limits of the undead crew's capabilities, he was certain that they definitely had more than one way to get rid of the Black Mummy. Otherwise, this group of people would not be watching this farce with such ease. This group of people is indeed very calm, but they are not too confident. Kaylan even felt that in the previous mimetic infection incident, even if he was unwilling to put on living armor, there was a high probability that the undead crew would not. The Tinder project will be launched. The reason why Pan said that was entirely to induce himself to put on this damn armor. But at that time, Kaylan had no better choice. If he didn't wear it, maybe the residents on the Ark would not be abandoned, but at least he himself would most likely end up in the underground ice house. Plan B definitely exists, but the problem is that this Plan B is very troublesome to operate. It is so troublesome that we even need to spend several years to make the preliminary layout. What's more, even if the preliminary work is completed, the final success rate will be very low. It's not necessarily high. The best plan is to let her take action. Unless she is unwilling to take action, we will make another decision. Of course, you can rest assured. As the closest human being to her in every sense, I think she should still be willing to help you wipe this ass," Pan added. "Okay, let me give it a try." Kaylan hung up the phone after saying that, and then turned to look at Caoge. "Your Excellency, Commander, I need you to provide me with a fast enough plane. I want to go back now, a trip to the Ark. In addition, while I am away, please keep an eye on the thing below. If there is any abnormality in it, please contact me and the crew immediately." "Okay, okay." Kaylan had hung up the phone for a while, and Caoge nodded as if he had woken up from a dream. "Can I ask, are you planning to bring her here?" Although Caoge didn't know what she in the conversation between Kaylan and Pan was referring to, the information revealed between the lines suggested that it should at least be something with the appearance of a human female. "Yes." Kaylan nodded, then glanced at him. Caoge suddenly realized that he had made a mistake and said quickly, "I know all the relevant confidentiality regulations. I guarantee that no one here today will leak what they heard." "Huh?" Kaylan was stunned for a moment, then smiled. "There's no need to be so nervous. Since the guy from the undead crew asked me to use her power to kill the thing below, then her existence and ability must be. You can't hide it. You have to meet her later." Kaylan didn't say anything, but it was okay. Caoge became even more nervous when he mentioned it. "Meet her? Is there anything I need to pay attention to?" Caoge was deeply impressed by the adjectives: the power to destroy the Ark at every turn and more dangerous than all the collections in the underground ice house put together in the conversation between Kaylan and Pan. In his opinion, the words Kaylan said bringing her to the First Fleet was simply more unsettling than holding a hydrogen bomb with a triggered fuse in both hands. "Relax, you just need to treat her as an ordinary girl full of curiosity," Kaylan said, patting Caoge on the shoulder. Although in Ian's own view, Curiosity is a person that makes people forget. It is not a reassuring attribute, but at least Ze Logo's curiosity is still within the normal range. Apart from that request that day, there has not been any behavior that violates human ethics and morals. As the fastest flying vehicle equipped by the First Fleet, the Peregrine-class high-speed reconnaissance aircraft took only 20 minutes to return Kaylan to the Ark. As soon as Kaylan got off the plane, he got on the military motorcycle with a jet propeller that had been prepared for him and rushed towards Zophia's residence. After Zofia left the Ark and went to Yagunakter, Ze Logo has been in a state of living alone. Kaylan was a little uneasy at first, but when he found out that Zofia and Ze Logo, the two people, have video calls for nearly an hour every day, and their relationship is so good that it's almost like biological sisters, I don't know why, but this uneasiness has faded away little by little. Many times, he almost regarded Ze Logo as a real human being. Until today, his conversation with Pan made him suddenly realize a neglected issue: Ze Logo is a completely different life form from humans. Although she wants to experience human life, she will never maybe actually become human. What Pan said is that she is a weapon made for the purpose of killing. When Kaylan pushed open the study door of Zophia's house, he found Ze Logo squatting on a chair, staring at the computer screen with all his attention, and her hands were moving so fast that you could almost see the after image. He manipulated the keyboard and mouse at a fast speed, and the keyboard kept making crackling sounds. Kaylan couldn't help but wonder in her heart, with this girl's ability, she should be able to completely defeat her opponent in any game. What kind of game could force her to be so focused? Kaylan took a closer look and found that what was running on the computer screen was a very old real-time strategy game, Red Alert 2, and an armored force controlled by Ze Logo was fighting against a colorful multinational coalition. Under the encirclement and suppression, they are retreating steadily. Red Alert, Kaylan was stunned for a moment. Although this game is old, it is still considered a classic. Of course he has played it before. The highest difficulty level in the standalone mode of this game is a pair of 7 ruthless enemies. For a novice who is new to this type of game, the 7 ruthless ace will most likely beat him to pieces, but for those who have a certain understanding of the game, for experienced players, it is actually not difficult to be ruthless against 7-on-1, especially on maps where you can blow up bridges and block terrain. As for Ze Logo, a humanoid plug-in who is ruthless against 7, she should be able to hit the enemy with one hand, right? How could he be forced to this point? Kaylan stood behind her and watched for a while, and immediately discovered the problem. The map Ze Logo was using was dozens of times larger than the largest map in Red Alert. In the old era, limited by the limitations of computing power in that era, the map size and number of units of Red Alert were limited, but in this era, any mid-range computer can play Red Alert with tens of thousands of units at the same time. On-screen combat runs smoothly. It turns out I played mod. Kaylan muttered softly, and then asked, "How difficult is it for you to play?" 127 cold, Ze Logo said. Disrespect, disrespect. Kaylan glanced at the game time. Although Ze Logo's base had been blown up by the enemy, she still led this remnant army and used various terrains to fight with the enemy. Sheng Sheng delayed the game time to nearly 30 minutes. Although the AI in old games like Red Alert only operates step by step, the quantitative gap is there. Especially in this kind of game with 2D graphics, attack locking, and simple calculation procedures, there is very little room for players to operate. 127 times more enemies. All it takes is one tank from one side to rush in and the player's base can be flattened, without any chance of resistance. That's it for F2A. All fancy operations are nothing but vulnerable embroidered pillows in the face of absolute power. Note, F2, select all units, A, attack command. Soon, the last Rhino tank operated by Ze Logo was destroyed by enemies pouring in from all over the mountains and plains. The screen froze and the word failure popped up in the middle of the screen. Ze Logo, who was sitting in front of the screen, sighed slightly and turned off the game. "Are you back?" Ze Logo turned his head and looked at Kaylan. In fact, Ze Logo had already sensed Ian's approach when he stepped within a few hundred meters of the house, but at that time she was too busy dealing with enemies 100 times her size that she couldn't get away. "Yes, there is a troublesome matter, it is related to you." Kaylan pulled a chair in front of the bookcase and sat down. "Has my existence been discovered?" Ze Logo said expressionlessly. "How did you know?" "For this period of time, I have been feeling that something is spying on me. This is a kind of spying beyond the 5 human senses. There is an elusive wave of thoughts that comes into contact with me. Well, if you want to use if I use it as a metaphor, it would be like a fortune teller predicting information related to me." Ze Logo said slowly, "This metaphor may be a bit strange, but among the literature I have read, the closest one is this feeling." "Fortune teller?" Kaylan was slightly startled. "Could it be some kind of detection method used by the undead crew?" From Ze Logo's description, this detection method seems to have a very strong metaphysical color. Kaylan feels that there is a high probability that this technology comes from Alpha civilization rather than human civilization. "Well, those people who are spying on you are the undead crew." "The Immortal Crew Association? Who are they?" Ze Logo looked at Kaylan curiously. "In all the documents I have read, there is no record of this organization." "Of course they won't appear in such documents that anyone can read." Kaylan stretched his body back and leaned on the leather-covered chair. "These people are secretly controlled by Ark, is the supreme ruler of human civilization if there is not another human civilization in this world." "Are they humans?" Kaylan thought Ze Logo would ask something else, but who knew that the first question she asked would be so sharp? Sharp and to the point. "I'm not sure." Kaylan shook his head. "I haven't seen them, but I think there is a high probability that they are human beings, at least they used to be, and their current thinking form is no different from humans, and their actions are also the same. It's for the sake of the Ark and the inhabitants of the Ark. At least I am more willing to believe them than the heretical sections." "Do you believe them?" Ze Logo asked. Kaylan always felt that this question was very familiar. It seemed that not long ago, someone asked him the exact same question. It's just that the questioner and the key figure in the question are exactly reversed. "I can only choose to believe it." Ian's answer was very different from before. "What will they do with me?" Ze Logo asked again. "One of them told me that he won't interfere with your life for the time being, although I'm not sure how long this guarantee will last. At least he told the truth. Otherwise the people who come to see you now won't." "It's me," Kaylan said. "Besides, I encountered some unsolvable troubles outside." "Is it an enemy?" "So, it's a monster summoned by a heretical section. None of the weapons currently owned by humans can cause damage to it, but it shouldn't be able to defend against your ability," Kaylan said. Ze Logo's ability is related to time and space. To use a proper noun in fantasy novels, this level of power is at the level of laws of heaven and earth. This kind of power cannot be achieved by relying solely on the physical strength of the body. Bearable. Thanks to the blessing of that crystal, Kaylan himself also possesses such power, but his ability is still mainly auxiliary. In terms of destructive power alone, it is incomparable to Ze Logo and the individual puppets. "Okay." Ze Logo nodded. When Kaylan and Ze Logo returned to the White Ridge Mountains, the entire First Fleet had basically assembled over the White Ridge Mountains. Dozens of dark warships were hovering in the sky 1,000 meters high. Just looking from a distance going there is full of visual pressure. "Your Majesty Commander, how is the situation now?" Kaylan asked Caoge straight to the point as soon as he stepped into the new flagship of the First Fleet. Caoge first glanced at Ze Logo, who was following Kaylan with extremely complex eyes, and then said to Kaylan, "The target has no abnormal behavior. During the hour you left, it has been moving towards the Ark. It moved in a certain direction, passed through 2 peaks, and moved a distance of about 7 kilometers. Crossing a mountain, if used on a person, most likely means that the person has climbed over the mountain or passed by the mountain. But when used on a black mummy, it means crossing through in the literal sense. Pass. It moved a distance of 7 kilometers and at the same time drilled a 7-kilometer-long tunnel inside the mountain. P.S. Thanks to the reading giraffe and Sopu for the 1,500 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 639. But after you left the Ark, the target's trajectory changed again. CAOGE added, but if you draw an extension line in the direction of each change of direction, this line will pass through where you are. The real-time coordinates of the location. It's really staring at me. It seems that no matter how far away I am from it, it can lock my position. Kaylan pondered, is this also the god of the heretical sect that gave it ability? What Kaylan can't figure out is why the great god gave the black mummy unparalleled strength, an indestructible body, and tracking capabilities that are almost comparable to the global positioning system of the old era. Why not give it to it? How about changing to a slightly easier to use brain? As long as this monster's IQ is a little higher, it doesn't need to be much. As long as it reaches the level of a normal person, the trouble it will bring to Kaylan and Ark will be hundreds of times more than it is now. At least, it won't be like now, bumping around in the mountain like a fool. Could it be that there were not enough sacrifices during the sacrifice? Kaylan was not sure, but fortunately at that time, besides him, there were only 3 people and 3 erosion seeds in the entire cockpit who could be used as sacrifices. Otherwise, the thing summoned by the Black Bishop would probably not be this. The stupid black mummy. But this incident also reminded Kaylan, the number of sacrifices in the Black Bishop's sacrificial ceremony can be superimposed. In other words, if the heretical sect wants to cause trouble, they can even gather more than a dozen. A Black Bishop plus hundreds of containers are used to complete the fusion sacrifice. With this amount of sacrifice, it can probably summon a prehistoric plant, right? Wait a minute. A bold idea suddenly appeared in Ian's head. Could it be that the primitive species on this planet were summoned in this way? Otherwise, why don't their genetic samples match any of the indigenous creatures on planet Alpha? There are no related species, and they have not left the slightest trace in the process of biological evolution. They are not even the creation of the Alpha civilization. These primitive species really seem to appear out of thin air. It's really strange. The heretical sect clearly has such powerful power in their hands. If they advance, they can use the side effects produced when the sacrificial ceremony is interrupted to draw a lottery. If they retreat, they can also gather a group of black bishops and seed of corrosion containers to summon the prehistoric monsters of this level. No matter which choice you choose, you can severely damage or even destroy the Ark, but the Prophet did not do so. In this way, Kaylan has more reason to believe that there is something in the Ark that the Prophet really wants or is very afraid of. The target is in sight, the staff officer on the side shouted, and at the top of a mountain peak, a black mummy emerged from the hard rock formation, raised its head, and looked at the battleship hovering in the sky. Its sight spanned a distance of hundreds of meters, penetrated the layers of armor and cabins on the battleship, and was firmly locked on Kaylan. Kaylan took a step back, and its sight moved a few times. Spend. Unfortunately, the black mummy does not have the ability to fly, and it does not seem to know how to jump. It can only stand on the top of the mountain, raise its head, and look at Kaylan, who is boarding the airship with a dull look on his face. Just when most people thought that the black mummy had nothing to do, the piercing siren suddenly rang inside the Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship. Then, the super battleship, more than 1,600 meters long, actually trembled in the air. He stood up as if he was going to crash at any moment. Metal parts such as buttons and rings on the officers' uniforms in the command room fell off one after another and were instantly sucked to the floor. The holographic projection image on the podium was even covered in large swaths of snowflake-like interference. "What's going on?" CAOGE's voice sounded a little painful. Although his mechanical prostheses are made of high-end titanium alloy and nano-alloy, some circuit structures and magnetized components will inevitably be interfered by magnetic fields. Even if these prosthetics have been designed with this problem in mind, the protective measures have limits. When the magnetic field is strong enough to a certain extent, it will still be affected. Black bruises flowed out of Caoge's nostrils and ears. He gritted his teeth and grabbed the edge of the table with his physical arms. Report. The ship is being pulled by a strong external magnetic field. The risk of crashing is rapidly increasing, the captain's voice came from the communicator. We may lose control of the warship at any time. Raise the altitude immediately, Caoge said immediately. The Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship's 8 main thrusters with a diameter of more than 35 meters simultaneously ejected faint blue tail flames. After the battleship's head was raised to a certain angle, the entire battleship trembled towards fly to higher places. It wasn't until the altimeter reading jumped to more than 4,700 meters that the battleship's hull stabilized, and the strong magnetic field interference disappeared. The military doctor on the battleship hurried over at this time, helped Caoge sit on a special wheelchair, and attached the electrodes of various examination equipment to his body and prosthetic body. It wasn't until the military doctor injected a tube of dark brown medicine into Caoge's body that Caoge's rapid breathing gradually calmed down. What happened just now? Is it related to the target? Go check it out quickly, Caoge ordered his subordinates, and several technical officers immediately immersed themselves in typing in front of the computer. A data model was quickly projected in front of everyone. Just 20 seconds ago, the magnetic field around the target's body disappeared. To be precise, it did not disappear, but was constrained into a straight line. A technical officer stumbled and said, "We can't figure it out. What is the principle behind this?" But judging from the comprehensive analysis of various monitoring data, the goal is to twist the magnetic field on its body into a rope, a gravity rope that is thousands of meters long. You mean, the battleship was held by this gravity rope just now, right? Caoge asked in a deep voice. Yes, the technical officer nodded. Continue to maintain this altitude and monitor the range of the magnetic field and gravitational field around the target at any time, Caoge ordered. Yes. The situation seems not quite right. Kaylan shook his head. This thing seems to be a little smarter. It seems to have a certain learning ability. Caoge frowned, and the muscles on his face were so tight that his half-flesh, half-machine face looked even more ferocious. If it had used this trick on the Albatross just now, with the engine propulsion of the aircraft, there would be no way to escape this gravitational field, Kaylan said. The Albatross would have crashed directly, and the crew on board would not have even parachuted. There is no chance of escape. Is this good news or bad news? Caoge couldn't help but reveal a wry smile. It's just that the smile on his face was almost scarier than crying. Kaylan suddenly understood why the new commander of the First Fleet had a poker face most of the time, to him speaking of which, perhaps the expressionless look is the least intimidating thing to look at. At least it's good news until no actual losses are caused. Kaylan turned to look at Zilugo behind him. What do you think? Can you get rid of this thing? I can try, but it's too far away from here, Zilugo said softly. Okay, I'll take you down. I will immediately arrange an elite force to escort you to the target, Caoge said immediately, but Kaylan waved his hand to him. There is no need to let your men take this risk. Even if we are really in danger, do you think they can play any role? This sentence immediately choked Caoge to speechlessness. Kaylan was absolutely right. No matter how many and elite soldiers were sent to an enemy that couldn't kill even the First Fleet, it was useless. The so-called escort sounds more like a joke. Okay, then I wish you good luck. In order to prevent the aircraft from being captured by the Black Mummy's magnetic field again, Kaylan and Zilugo took a light glider made entirely of high molecular polymers without any metal parts. The moment the glider passed over the top of the mountain, Kaylan jumped out of the cabin with Ze-Lugo in his arms and landed less than 20 meters away from the Black Mummy. The Black Mummy slowly turned around, staring at him dimly with her whiteless eyes, and took a step towards Kaylan. But the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. The lower body of the Black Mummy was moving forward, but its upper body was frozen in place. Immediately afterwards, this strange and incongruous feeling was clicked. The crisp sound was broken, and an obvious crack appeared on the waist and abdomen of the Black Mummy. The crack expanded rapidly and covered the middle part of the Black Mummy's body like a spider web. This was the first time that it had damage that could be observed with the naked eye. Black, metallic debris fell from its body. Before it hit the ground, it had already turned into finer dust and completely dissipated in the ground. In the biting cold wind, I solidified the space where its upper body was, but the movement of its legs did not stop. Ze-Lugo said to Kaylan, in fact, its body was torn apart by its own power. I knew the power of this thing was terrifying, but I didn't expect it to be so outrageous. Kaylan smacked his lips. His body, which was unscathed by the nuclear explosion, could actually be torn apart. It should be easier for this Black Mummy to tear apart those warships floating in the sky. Caca. The cracks were still spreading. Finally, the Black Mummy's upper and lower bodies broke apart. Its legs took a few steps forward with inertia, and then crashed to the ground, shattering into powder. The body that originally had physical strength far exceeding that of nano-alloy now looks as fragile as ordinary glass. The next second, the upper body that was freed from the solidified time and space also hit the ground. Unlike the lower body, an irregular crystal fell out of the fragments of the Black Mummy's upper body. The shape of this crystal looks like the core of the seed of erosion, but there is no bright red blood of God in it, only a drop of asphalt-like black round droplet. When Kaylan picked up the crystal, the drop of liquid was shrinking rapidly. In less than 3 seconds, it completely disappeared under Kaylan's eyes, leaving only a hard transparent crystal. Kaylan put the crystal away and turned his head, only to find Ze-Lugo raising his little head and looking at the sky blankly. What's wrong? Kaylan also followed her line of sight and looked up into the sky, but he could only see the battleships covering the sky and the various fighter jets surrounding the battleships. He could not find any other unusual things. Just now, when this thing was broken, something seemed to look at me, Ze-Lugo said. Is it the Immortal Crew Association? It's not them, it's a completely different feeling. That line of sight seems to come from a very, very far away place, Ze-Lugo said. Kaylan's breath suddenly hitched. He knew very well what that line of sight Ze-Lugo was referring to. That was the gaze from him. When the Black Mummy was summoned to this world, Kaylan had felt the gaze from him, and now, when the Black Mummy fell apart, his gaze was once again on the planet, sweeping across the sky. But this time he was not looking at Kaylan, but Ze-Lugo, who had killed the Black Mummy. Kaylan felt that his heartbeat couldn't help but get faster. He couldn't help but look at Ze-Lugo carefully, trying to find any subtle changes in her body. Do you have any different feelings from before? Kaylan couldn't help but ask. Ze-Lugo shook his head and said, only when I was stared at by that line of sight, my body seemed unable to move, but it was only a very short moment. If measured in human timing units, not even a microsecond. None. A microsecond, to a human being, may be just a thought that flashes through the mind and does not even leave much memory. It is not even a momentary illusion, but anyone who has been looked at by him people would not think so. At the moment of being watched, time is frozen, a moment is eternity, and it is perfect to use it here. It was an experience that can be called unforgettable. Although all the details will become blurred in the memory, the sight itself will be deeply imprinted in the consciousness of the person being watched. Other than that, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere in your body? Kaylan asked again. My body does not produce uncomfortable symptoms. However, if you want me to simulate human pain or physical injury, I can do it? Ze Luo looked at Kaylan with some doubts. PS Thanks to Simple for the 500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 640. I almost forgot that your human body was created by mimicry. Kaylan touched the tip of his nose awkwardly. Then, hasn't there been any change in your original body? No, Ze Luo said. One of her arms suddenly turned into a black asphalt-like substance, swayed in front of Kayan's eyes, and then turned back into that beautiful limb as white as a lotus root. Kaylan couldn't help but fell into deep thought. Although the sight from the god had seen them, it did not take action because he and Ze Luo destroyed the things summoned by his followers with sacrifices. Any move. Kaylan knew that he had the ability to interfere in this world. Among other things, Yui Arazaka, who exploded in front of him that day, was the best proof. If he was willing, he could also easily obliterate himself and Ze Luo. But he just watched. Kaylan couldn't figure out why he did this. Was it just to kill the boring time of hundreds of millions of years? God, can you get bored too? Kaylan has never thought that the entire Alpha planet is an artificially created testing ground, and all living things on this planet are experimental samples under observation, but as the secrets he knows become more and more, he felt more and more that the idea of a testing ground was untenable. With his ability, he could literally turn his hands into clouds and turn his hands into rain, so what was the point of building such a testing ground? For a being that is nearly omniscient and omnipotent, whether it is a human, an alpha, or even those incredible prehistoric beasts, there is essentially no difference. This may be a little difficult to understand, so you might as well change it. Statement. Assuming that humans have completely deciphered the genetic code of an organism and have a clear understanding of the organism's birth, aging, illness, and death, as well as various future mutation and evolution pathways, humans will also spend a lot of time and energy specifically building an ecological experiment box, using come and observe every move of this creature in daily life. There may be such experiments in biology classes used to enlighten children, but as a benchmark for the highest technological standards, the research institute will never waste resources on such things. When a thing no longer has any unknown attributes, it naturally loses its value for exploration. Unknown attributes. Kaylan couldn't help but glance at the gap between the battleships and the sky covered by radiation clouds. Is there something unknown to him in the Alpha people, or in other words, humans? Kaylan was left in a daze for only a few minutes. A large number of heavily armed Marines had already landed on the top of the mountain. Caoge jumped out of the cabin of a transport plane nearly 10 meters above the ground. With the help of the built-in propeller of the mechanical prosthetic body, it landed steadily on the ground. Resolved, Caoge walked quickly to Kaylan and looked with some disbelief at the place where the black mummy turned into pieces and then disappeared. That's right. Kaylan curled his lips. This thing feels like a piece of tempered glass to me. Tempered glass refers to special glass that has been specially treated to produce compressive stress on the glass surface. The impact resistance and load-bearing capacity of tempered glass are much stronger than ordinary glass, but it also has defects that ordinary glass does not have. When tempered glass is damaged, even if it is just a small damage such as a missing corner, the entire glass will explode due to the destruction of the uniform compressive stress balance, and the entire glass will instantly become shattered. Just as Kaylan said, the body of this black mummy, which could not be damaged even by nuclear bombs, was torn apart by Ze Luo's space stasis, and the entire body instantly lost its original physical strength. Kaylan had even felt that what previously maintained the strength of the black mummy's body was not the material itself, but an unknown force field. This force field restrains the black mummy's body, but at the same time it also gives it a terrifying defense that is almost immune to physical attacks. However, Ze Luo's ability can just restrain and destroy this force field. And when the force field disappears, just like the stress balance of tempered glass collapses, even if Kaylan and the others don't attack the Black Mummy, the Black Mummy's body will collapse on its own. Kaylan couldn't help but feel a little pity in his heart. He originally thought that through the study of Black Mummies, he would be able to make some breakthroughs in the field of human materials science. He stretched out his hand and showed the crystal. "This is the only remnant of the target," Kaylan said to CAOGE. Every move he and Ze-Logo made was watched by the monitors on the battleship. Not only CAOGE and others, but also people from the Immortal Crew Club should be paying attention to the situation here. They must have also seen this crystal. Instead of being asked to hand it in later, it is better to take it out now. What's more, Kaylan doesn't know whether this thing is dangerous or not. In the old era, some people often regarded radioactive materials picked up from garbage dumps as treasures. However, in their eyes, these night pearls can glow and heat. It is completely the beginning of a nightmare. When they realize that there is something wrong with their body, it is usually too late. What awaits them is death approaching step by step. "I'll have someone bring a safe container over immediately," CAOGE said cautiously. "What should I do with this thing?" "Send it back to ARC, to the Institute." Before Kaylan had time to answer, Pan's voice rang in the headphones worn by him and CAOGE at the same time. "Just keep this trophy of yours for yourself." "I'll keep it for myself?" "You don't have any conspiracy, right?" Kaylan suddenly became wary when he thought of the living armor in his body. He even felt that the crystal lying in the palm of his hand suddenly became hot to the touch. "What kind of conspiracy can I have? Please don't think of me as a bad person, okay?" Pan's tone was helpless. "The matter of the living armor has just passed not long ago," Kaylan said immediately. "That's to save you. Besides, can you think of a better way? Besides, aren't you using the power of the living armor very well? But no one would like to have a bomb planted inside their body, right? As long as this bomb never explodes, it is safe," Pan argued. "For example, suppose you are a heart patient. If you don't change your heart, you will die soon, but you can use it to replace it. There is only one artificial heart, and it also contains a bomb that cannot be disassembled and will explode at an unknown time. So do you choose to die immediately, or replace it with a heart containing a bomb?" "Then I will choose to have a second heart transplant surgery in the future," Kaylan replied without thinking. "That's fine, if you can find a way to separate the living armor. No matter how you handle it, the undead crew will not interfere with your decision. We have always respected everyone's freedom." "You can save the second half of your sentence. When this sentence comes out of your mouth, it easily reminds me of a rogue country between the Pacific and the Atlantic in the old era." Kaylan didn't say anything. He retorted mercilessly, "Also, tell me what this crystal is and what it does. Don't tell me you know nothing. Do you think I will believe you?" "This is really just a piece of waste core," Pan said. "It was originally the core in the body of the corroded seed that was sacrificed. The flesh, and power in the core have been drained, leaving only this one, the empty shell. Although it's useless, it's actually pretty cool to keep as a souvenir, right? Then if I plan to put this thing up for auction, will you stop me? I think the stupid and wealthy people on the Ark will be very interested in this kind of object, right? It just so happens that the God Hunting Group has been on the move recently. Funds are a little short. This thing should fetch a good price." "It's best not to." Hearing that Kaylan planned to sell the crystal, Pan quickly said, "Okay, to tell you the truth, this thing is indeed a useless core, but it's only special. The only difference is that a beacon is imprinted on it." "Beacon?" Kaylan stared at the crystal in his hand in confusion. "What beacon?" "It has something to do with the great god believed in by the Alpha civilization. We have discovered hundreds of objects with beacons like this on planet Alpha, but until now, we have not figured out what the beacon does. Things related to that god are never good things. I think I'd better throw it away." Kaylan looked at the cliff not far away. "There should be no problem if it is thrown in this valley." bar. I suggest you keep this thing with you. Although we have not discovered the function of the beacon so far, every beacon is under our close surveillance, so even if any beacon changes, we will be able to respond immediately. Then why don't you take this thing away? Because we want to see if something interesting will happen with this beacon in your hands, Pan said bluntly. You can think of this as an experiment, but you have no right to refuse. Who just said that everyone's freedom will be respected? You can think I just farted, Pan said shamelessly. This thing won't suddenly open a portal while I'm sleeping, and then a lot of alien monsters will come out of it, right? Kaylan asked. To be honest, he really wanted to throw this crystal out, but he also knew that even if he threw away the beacon, it wouldn't be long before the undead crew would send it back to him, or even, they will also stuff themselves with more other beacons. They have already boarded this thief ship. Even if Kaylan wants to refuse, it is useless. The first beacon object we discovered was a stone tablet. It was found in the B-009 ruins in 902 of the New Era and is now stored in the underground ice house of the Institute. Placed together with the stone tablet is another 94 beacons. In addition, there are 31 beacons left inside the ruins due to reasons such as being too large or unable to be moved. But whether they are beacons in the underground ice house or in the ruins, the beacon has been silent for decades. As he spoke, Pan added, we believe that they will maintain their status quo for hundreds of years to come. A few hundred years is equivalent to several or even a dozen generations for humans, but for the existence of these beacons to be imprinted, it only takes a blink of an eye. You can rest assured that in your lifetime, this beacon will most likely be a dumb bomb that will never explode. What about the small probability? Besides, since there is no movement, why do you let me take this thing with me? Out of curiosity. Curiosity will kill the cat. So do you think you are that cat? Why are you starting to be the Riddler too? You were the one who got involved with the cat first, Pan argued like a child arguing. Well, I can promise you that as long as you carry this beacon, in 6 months, you can directly. How about becoming a member of the crew association? All the previous assessment tasks will count as your passing. 3 months. 5 months, no more. 4 months, fixed price, this is my bottom line. 4.5 months, if it's shorter, you'd better throw this thing away, Pan said angrily. Make a deal. Keeping this dangerous item with you for 4.5 months can be exchanged for the opportunity to join the Undead Crew Club. This is a very good deal for Kaylan, and he has no reason to refuse. Even if Pan rejected his bargaining at the beginning, Kaylan would eventually agree to the 6-month condition. Facing the absolute power of the Immortal Crew Association, he had no right to refuse. It was better to use this as a bargaining chip to gain more benefits for himself. Even if you want to sell yourself, at least you have to sell it for a good price. The expression on Ian's face didn't change much. On the contrary, Caoge, who had listened to the entire bargaining process, stared at him in astonishment. If nothing unexpected happened, 4.5 months later, this person who looked like less than a 30-year-old young man will become a member of the Immortal Crew. This is an organization that symbolizes the highest power of mankind, but it gives Caoge the feeling that the two of them are buying vegetables at the vegetable market. This was the first time that Caoge saw the true form of a member of the Undead Crew. An indescribable sense of unreality surged up from the bottom of his heart. He stretched out a finger of his prosthetic limb and placed it on his other biological body. On the arm, electric sparks passed over. Hiss, it hurts. Looking at the burning marks and the heartbreaking pain on his arm, Caoge realized that everything he just heard was true. This is too child's play, no. This is too crazy, right? Caoge couldn't help but said in his heart, but the expression on his face did not dare to show any abnormality, for fear that the young crew member in front of him would judge him. Members are aware of it. Oh, by the way, there's another thing, Pan said again. What's up? According to the route of the hijacked Hercules transport plane, we found signs of activities of heretical sects north of the White Ridge Mountains. Is it the stronghold of the heretic sect? Can't we just use missiles to call it over? Anyway, they have no hostages in their hands, Kaylan said. No, it's not the stronghold you imagined. They occupy an A-level ruins. According to our estimates, the heretical sect has most likely controlled the core defense modules inside the ruins, Pan said in a serious tone. Class A ruins north of the White Ridge Mountains. A map of planet Alpha suddenly appeared in Ian's mind. The ruins north of the White Ridge Mountains are the only ancient Bronze City ruins numbered A-009. This is one of the earliest A-level ruins discovered by humans. Because most of the materials used in the buildings in the city ruins are an alloy with copper as the main component, it was named Ancient Bronze City. There are not many valuable relics inside the ancient Bronze City, but various defense facilities and institutions emerge in endlessly. To use a saying in the hunter circle to describe it, it is the risk of Class A ruins, the oil and water of Class D ruins. Time after a long time, few hunters explored this A-level ruins. I just didn't expect that this forgotten A-level ruins would now be the home of a heretical section. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 641. Since the heretical sect's stronghold is located deep in the ruins, and the ruins' defense facilities are most likely to have been fully activated, if the army is used to attack by force, the casualties will be immeasurable, Penn continued. A city of Alpha civilization, even if it is a severely damaged ruin, as long as its original defense facilities can be activated to 10/20ths, it will be a fortress that cannot be conquered by the human army. For example, assuming that the human army attacks the intact Alpha civilization city head-on, it is equivalent to primitive people holding spears and wearing leaves launching a surprise attack on a modern tank phalanx. Then, the ruins of an Alpha civilization city are equivalent to replacing a tank with a Maxim heavy machine gun that appeared in the late 19th century. The result will not be much different. The reason why ruin hunters can enter these high-level ruins is entirely because these ruins are usually in a sleep state, and only a small part of the defense mechanisms and facilities are still operating, but even so, exploring these ruins, the casualty rate for high-level ruins remains high. And now, the heretical sect has completely controlled the ruins of a city of Alpha civilization, let alone sneaking into the ruins. Even getting close to it will become an extremely difficult task. In addition to the first cruise fleet, we will invest 14 ground troops, totaling about 160,000 troops, to encircle the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. This siege war requires the assistance of the God Hunting Group. Pan said in a tone that could not be refused. 160,000 people, this is almost the entire mobile force that the Field Corps can deploy, except for those strongholds, military bases, and transportation lines that must be garrisoned. There has never been such a large-scale military operation since the Ark gained a foothold on Alpha. Aren't you afraid that this is a trap? Kaylan said. If these troops are trapped and killed in the ruins, the heretical sect may take advantage of it and directly attack the Ark. But it is also a very rare opportunity. If the effective forces of the heretical sect can be successfully annihilated, at least in the next 10 years, Ark's foreign troubles can be effectively alleviated. Your deal doesn't sound like a good deal at all. The chips and benefits on both sides are completely unequal. Kaylan took a long breath and continued, it's okay to do stud, but you can't beat the opponent to death even if you do stud. If you win the bet, you'll get nothing. If you lose the bet, you'll lose everything. This is a loss of blood. There is never a completely fair deal in this world. Okay, even if you want to bet, don't drag me into it. This is war, and we are just ruin hunters, not soldiers or mercenaries, Kaylan said. You are soldiers, Pan said immediately. Don't forget, you have all joined the military. If you run away from battle, you will be punished as a deserter. Good guy, it turned out that you were waiting to take advantage of us at this time, right? If you had known, We might as well have been squatting in the security bureau's cell for a few months. Do you think you can come out intact after entering the detention room of the security bureau? That's better than being cannon fodder and attacking a city of awakened alphas. Don't be cowardly, I can guarantee that you will not be used as cannon fodder and thrown into the frontline combat sequence. Before Pan could finish speaking, Kaylan made plans for him. I know that we will probably be treated as a surprise attack team, sneaking into the ruins of the ancient bronze city from the side and rear, and then carrying out sabotage or direct beheading operations. The survival rate is also not good. It will be much higher than cannon fodder, right? If you can regain control of the core of the bronze city, your safety will definitely be guaranteed even if you are trapped deep in the enemy's lines. This is all nonsense. I just want to ask one thing, are we qualified to refuse this mission? No. Pan's answer was very direct. Okay, I can participate in this battle, but in terms of specific actions, I need enough autonomy. Kaylan said, I will judge the battlefield situation and plan action steps on my own. I don't want to put my own and my companions' my life was placed in the hands of a group of commanders and staff officers whom I didn't know at all. Whether it is 33, Valentina, or Laugo's former troops, they have all been tricked by the military to a greater or lesser extent, so much so that Ian's trust in the military's command is infinitely close to zero. In the eyes of the commander, every soldier is just a number on the sand table of war. They can throw these fresh lives into the abyss without any scruples to fill the ravines on the way forward, but he couldn't let his teammates become victims of war. Kaylan, Zeelogo, and Caoge returned to the First Fleet's new flagship Suzaku, while the soldiers stayed behind. Their mission is to clean up the battlefield. Although the Black Mummy has turned into pieces and dispersed in the wind, some necessary aftermath steps are still indispensable. If the people from the Institute were here, they would even destroy this mountain. The dust from every rock crevice on the mountain was dug out and transported back to the research laboratory. By the way, how are Lin Keiming and Dr. Norrison's team doing now? Have the search and rescue personnel found them? Kaylan asked after taking a cup of coffee handed over by the orderly on the side, taking a sip. The search and rescue operation has ended. Thanks to the relatively short window for parachuting, their landing points were relatively concentrated, and everyone was found in less than an hour. Caoge said. His cup was also dark brown. It was a liquid, but it exuded a strong medicinal smell, which was obviously not the same thing as what Kaylan drank. Seemingly seeing Kaylan paying attention to his drink, Caoge raised his cup and said, Anti-rejection medicine, I have to drink several cups every day. There is no other way. Although the technology of cyborg prosthetics has developed to this day, the problem of rejection between prosthetics and native bodies has been solved to some extent, but there are differences between people after all. There are so many a small number of people's bodies will always reject the installed prostheses, and even genetic editing surgery cannot solve this problem. For these few unfortunate people, there are only two in front of them. Choice: first, remove the cybernetic body; second, just like Caoge, take a large amount of anti-rejection drugs with strong side effects every day. Kaylan was stunned for a moment and immediately changed the subject. What are the casualties among those rescued? Fortunately, no one died, but 2 researchers suffered severe frostbite due to damaged equipment, and 1 person hit the cliff and suffered multiple fractures throughout his body. They have all been sent to the medical cabin on the ship. There is no danger to life. As for the avalanche caused by the subsequent bombing, it did not pose much of a threat. After the positioning was completed, the rescue team directly used laser weapons to cut through the snow, and the last person dug out was just buried under a snowdrift for 10 minutes. The situation was better than I expected. I thought at least a few people would die, Kaylan said. The airbag ball installed in the life-saving equipment has done a great job. Without it, the avalanche alone would be enough to kill everyone. After Caoge finished speaking, he raised his head and took a sip of the hot potion in the cup. He fell down and then coughed violently. Ahem, although I have no sense of taste anymore, every time I drink this thing, it feels like I drank a glass of burning alcohol. This feeling, after so many years, I still can't get used to it, ahem. Caoge's face flushed red, and the 5 fingers of his prosthetic limb clenched instantly, leaving 5 shallow marks on the alloy seat armrest. This description sounds like a spirit with a high alcohol content. Kaylan looked at Caoge and said, "You didn't really like drinking bars before." "As a soldier, I don't drink alcohol." Caoge shook his head, "but this thing and alcoholic beverages are definitely 2 different things. You will know just by touching this cup. By the way, be careful of burns." The cup Caoge used to fill the medicine was specially made. The outer layer was made of silicone insulation layer and the inner layer was made of some kind of ceramic material. Kaylan stretched out his finger and touched the ceramic inner wall of the cup briefly, and immediately understood what Caoge said. The cup is empty, but the temperature on the inner wall is still as high as nearly 200 degrees. You can imagine how high the temperature of the medicine contained in it was originally. Caoge's description of it being like drinking burning alcohol is actually not an exaggeration, because the original temperature of this cup of potion is actually almost the same as that of burning alcohol. Fortunately, Caoge's mouth and digestive tract were also replaced with cybernetic prosthetics, otherwise this thing could directly burn through the esophagus. What kind of medicine is this? Generally speaking, for this kind of rejection reaction, doesn't it just take immunosuppressants on time? Kaylan couldn't restrain her curiosity and asked. Rejection means that after foreign tissues enter the host's body, the host's own immune system regards these foreign tissues as enemies invading the body and launches an attack on them. Generally, the most commonly used method to suppress rejection is hormones, drugs and cytotoxic drugs, but no matter which treatment method is used, the patient will not be allowed to drink liquid with a temperature of several hundred degrees. After all, not everyone has a prosthetic mouth and digestive tract. For those who use native digestive tracts, this behavior is tantamount to murder. This is a biological agent. I don't know the specific formula. People from the institute prepared it for me. Anti-rejection is only part of its effect. Its main purpose is to suppress the biological toxins in my body. Biological toxins, Kaylan suddenly thought of the reason why Caoge was injured. Is it because of those bugs? Yes, Caoge nodded. When those bugs eat, they will inject a corrosive venom into the food. This toxin cannot be completely removed by existing medical methods. If I don't use this biological agent, if I suppress them, my body will be corroded bit by bit into a pool of smelly pus. I can help you remove toxins. Zilugo, who was sitting quietly playing on his mobile phone, suddenly said. Do you have a solution? Caoge was stunned for a moment. For some reason, his original fear of Zilugo suddenly dissipated a lot. If he hadn't just seen the changes in Zilugo's arms in the surveillance camera, he would have even thought that she was an ordinary human girl who was introverted and not very talkative. Apart from that, her appearance could only be described as perfect. 2 words to describe it. Caoge has seen many beautiful women, and there are also many beautiful female officers and soldiers on the Suzaku flagship, but if these people stand next to the girl in front of him, they will suddenly be overshadowed. I can try. Zilugo nodded and stood up. Is that okay? Caoge looked at Kaylan, with a hint of hope in his eyes. The feeling of being tormented by residual toxins day and night is difficult to describe in words. Among the people Kaylan knows, Valentina is probably the only one who can empathize with this. No matter how resolute a tough guy is, he will gradually collapse under this kind of torture for many years. Kaylan can clearly feel that compared to the first time he saw him, Caoge has changed in more than half a year. Here, he seemed to have aged nearly 10 years. Caoge's real age is actually less than 40 years old, but he looks like an old man who is over 50 and about to enter his 60s. Kaylan even suspected that if this trend continues, maybe after a while, the commander of the First Fleet will be replaced again. But now Ze-Logo actually offers to help CAOGE remove the remaining toxins, which is naturally the best thing. Are you sure it can be removed? Kaylan asks Yang Ze-Logo. CAOGE's situation is actually very different from Valentina's. Although Valentina also suffered from old injuries and some residual biological toxins, but the reason why she fell into the state was entirely because she did not receive proper treatment, and later she and Major Chi also delayed the injury again and again due to financial reasons. Speaking of Major Chi, Kaylan suddenly felt that taking this opportunity, he might be able to offer conditions to the Undead Crew Association for his release. As an experienced veteran and mechanical maintenance engineer, it would be terrible to be locked up in prison like this. What a waste. Closer to home, Valentina's condition improved a lot after being nursed back to Saccharina. If it hadn't been for too long, she would have been cured by now, and CAOGE, he could enjoy the medical treatment. The conditions were definitely the best on the Ark, but even so, the Institute was still unable to completely solve his physical problems and could only use drugs to delay time. The difficulty of treatment between the two is completely different. If it's just toxins secreted by insect creatures, that's fine. As he said that, Ze-Logo had already walked up to CAOGE. What should I do? CAOGE asked in a deep voice. To be honest, he is no longer so afraid of this girl who has the ability to destroy the entire Ark. Even if the treatment fails, the situation cannot get worse. Maybe I can get relief from it. Just stretch out your arms and lie back on the chair, Ze-Logo said.